better working relationship. What is most at stake, or is most a challenge for us, is where the funding is concerned. SHIs and some of the OTAs do have challenges in sourcing funding, and also the funders themselves do have their own challenges in terms of finding each other with the SHIs and the OTAs in terms of the documentation that is being presented, the requirements that need to be met by both the SHI and us ourselves from SHRA. So today we are going to, I'm not sure if everybody has seen the program. If not, Lisiho, I'm going to ask you to flight the program for everybody to see. We're going to have a session that is going to be presented by the CEO of the entity, Mr. Sandile Luthuli, to present to you what has been our performance over the MTSF period, which is 2020. Okay, let me not, but this the MTSF period that we are currently in, and what we are seeking to, how we are aiming at improving our performance going forward. And from that, we would then have an open dialogue where we are going to welcome suggestions, questions, and anything that you can contribute to that particular topic, whilst Mr. Luthuli would have presented his reflections on the program itself. So I'm not going to make this long and about myself, and I want it to be a session. It would have been ideal for us to have a physical session, but looking at things economically and the period that we're currently in, people are all over, and we would have really appreciated if this was a physical session, but this is how things are done in the moment as well. So we are embracing the moment that we're in, which is a moment where we engage with each other in this type of form as well. So I'm hoping that from this session, we're going to have very fruitful outcomes that are going to assist us in our performance as a sector, and also enabling that environment for all of us to thrive. So at this point, welcome everybody, and CEO, I'm going to hand over to you for you to take us through your presentation. Thank you. You're on mute, CEO.
Good, thank you. Good morning, everyone, from wherever you are joining us. And thank you very much for sharing your time with us this morning. Mine, as the chairperson has already indicated, is to reflect on what we have been able to achieve, very much with your assistance, in the 29 to 24 MTSF period. But before I do that, I would like to acknowledge the various key stakeholder groups that are here, starting with the chairperson, who is leading our council, representatives from the department, yourselves as our partners and key stakeholder in the delivery of social housing. But we are also dependent on quite a number of people, consultants who help us package some of these projects. There are funders in the room, but also acknowledge the presence of the SHRA staff, who on a day-to-day basis engage with you and maintain those primary relationships to ensure that ultimately we emerge with a mutually beneficial outcome. So on that note, I think I will start with my presentation. Let me just, there we go. Okay. My reflection will be mainly in 4 areas: the current MTSF performance and delivery, the capacity, financial capacity and pipeline management, some of the challenges that we are seeing across the sector, and give you some updates. The slide that you are looking at speaks to very much, what we have been able to deliver in terms of the number of units. Now you will see in the top right corner that the total number of completions units completed since 2019 is 13,300, and I'm rounding up here, against total approvals of 17,332, giving us a conversion ratio of 77%. But we must note that we have not stripped out of the approvals those numbers, those projects that have actually been cancelled for various reasons. So conservatively, that 77% is actually a conservative number. If we were to adjust it for the cancellations, it's probably sitting somewhere between 85 and 90% conversion ratio, which means that we are actually effectively delivering on the mandate that has been given to us. But it's not just about delivering units on the ground. It's also about ensuring that those units are tenanted. In this particular slide, we reflect on how the tenanting has actually behaved over the last number of years. Now, you see that there is a huge gap in the 2020-2021 financial year, and that's primarily because of the COVID year. But when you look at the 2 subsequent financial years, you begin to see the gap narrowing on a year-on-year basis. We are concerned in the current financial year, and these are the figures as we have them as at December 2023, that gap is beginning to reflect what transpired in 2020-2021. And our plea here, more than anything, is that as our key stakeholders and persons on the ground, we do, put effort to try and close this, because ultimately it is in all our interests. One, we are giving people decent housing that they so desperately require, but also it's about income generation to ensure that these projects can become sustainable on your side. So the sooner we try and close this gap here, which is about 700 units, but it can actually worsen, it's important that we do this. This is just the detailed and looking at our conversion ratio again, tenanting in relation to completions. That number is sitting at about 86% overall. But ideally, given the demand supply equation in the country, this number should ideally be in the mid-90s, if not closer to 100%. In this bottom table, we look at the MTSF target, what we have achieved, and as at December, we are sitting at 78%, with the possibility that come March 2024, being the end of the MTSF, we would have achieved closer to 80% thereof. Now, here we reflect on delivery by the various provinces. What we are seeing across the board is that the contribution at a provincial level has been muted, save for Gauteng, that has not only reached its numbers, but also surpassed the targets that were set for them. We can delve into the reasons why Gauteng is more successful than others, but one of the primary reasons is population distribution, issues of migration, etc., etc. The key issue for me is that there needs to be an engagement between the provinces and ourselves, jointly with the department, to understand the root causes for this muted contribution, so that as we begin to plan for the new MTSF 2024 to 2029, we can try and reverse the picture that we are seeing here. But I must also acknowledge the fact that in respect of some of the provinces where there are negative variances as reflected, there are projects that are currently in the pipeline and will be completed or will make a substantial contribution before the end of the financial year in order to reverse the picture as we see it currently. So it's not all doom and gloom across the board. Yeah. Now, here we reflect on the utilization of our budget. And the key message more than anything is that as a program, we deploy the capital that has been given to us as the SHRA, achieving over the MTSF period roughly 98% of our CCG budget. For the current financial year, we are projecting that we will achieve just in the region of about 1.1 billion rand. As the meeting can see, that as at the end of Q3, the original approved budget, we had reached it already and surpassed it by 4%. In the main, it's accelerating projects that could have been delayed during those COVID years and are coming on stream now. So the future, as things currently stand, is looking bright. Now, we are a national program, and preparing for this, I reflected on, I looked at the response by Minister Kubai to the SONA debate of which took place a week and a half ago. And in it, the minister had this to say, you know, as part of her report back to the president, and reflects on the undertakings that were given to the president in respect of the social housing program. And these are the words that she had to use. And following on from this is the various projects that are either sitting, you know, in the infrastructure SA pipeline. Dr. Musevedi is going to be speaking a little bit later. They are assisting us as the infrastructure fund. So there's a lot of those projects that are in the pipeline. Some of them have been completed, some of them are in the pipeline. But the essence of this is that social housing still remains a national imperative, as reflected in this particular slide. And that national imperative is actually underpinned by how this program actually contributes to key development outcomes that government is looking for in the economic reconstruction and recovery program. We look at this from a mandate alignment point of view in terms of the delivery of housing units. This speaks just to the current financial year, so it doesn't speak to what we have done previously. So just under 2,500 units delivered in the current financial year against a target of 3,200. Our contribution to capital formation, a key part of the GDP equation, at 831 million. The level of job creation at 6,205. A lot of the money that we deploy goes towards helping SMMEs in the execution of the projects, whether as professional teams that are executing or as subcontractors who are implementing these projects. But we also monitor the benefit that goes towards designated groups. And in this instance, there was 27% of that 831 million, 27% thereof assisted women-owned entities, and about 10% of it assisted youth-owned entities. From a BEE point of view, a key requirement in transforming the economic landscape of the country. All our new projects that were approved in the current financial year had significant Black ownership in it. But in another program that we have, and Deovat is going to come in a little bit later, institutional investment grants, the recipients thereof very much benefiting Black-owned entities as well as other designated groups. So this is very much a reflection on the MTSF. We move to the second part of this, which is around our capacity, looking forward. And it's opportune that we are meeting today with the Minister of Finance having delivered the budget speech yesterday. And these are some of the extracts from the budget speech delivered by the Minister of Finance yesterday. Looking at the economic outlook, revised GDP growth down to 0.6% from 0.9%, as well as elevated levels of inflation. The medium-term outlook, so projecting forward, so therefore prospects are much greater at 1.6%, compared with 1.4% that had been previously projected. This is, the Achilles heel of the South African economy. When you look at 0.8% growth averaged out over the past 11 years, and Cabinet and the relevant officials at Treasury and other areas are seized with saying, how do we grow the economy so that not only does it create jobs, but it also absorbs quite a lot of people. But on the fiscal policy side, the minister was very clear to say the key focus is around debt stabilization. The key focus is around expenditure control. It's around fiscal consolidation. That's the message that came out very strongly yesterday. With that fiscal consolidation and expenditure control, government is hoping to eventually achieve a budget surplus in the 24-25 financial year, and in other financial years going forward. So hopefully this does materialize because programs like ours are highly dependent on the state, and this augurs well for prospects of revenue collection and other elements. We reflect here on the SHRA budget for the medium term, and critically is that this is what has been allocated to us as the SHRA for the coming years. 864 across all programs, 902 in the 25-26 year, and 943. Collectively, it's 2.7 billion. But of that, 88% is allocated towards the consolidated capital grant. This is where we build and deliver new housing units as part of our mandate. So from that perspective, not only is the commitment made in terms of the minister's response to the SONA debate, but it is followed by the relevant budget allocations that we are seeing here. Just to confirm that there has been a budget reduction of 315 million rand over a 3-year period. The impact and the implications of this will be tabled before our council as the custodians, as the ultimate custodians of the organizational strategy. Now, we reflect here on the pipeline. This is the pipeline as at the end of Q3. It is very much reflective of the earlier slide where we were looking at provincial performance. You can see that Gauteng has a fairly active social housing sector, followed by KZN, and the rest of the provinces are then coming through. Now, just from a numbers perspective, there are 62 projects with a potential yield of 29,600 units. There's an equal split between social housing institutions and other delivery agents in the makeup of those 62 projects. So, as I said earlier on, that there needs to be engagement with the other provinces to try and understand the root causes that we see, not only in terms of the current MTSF, but what these numbers are telling us is that the picture may not change when we look at the new MTSF period. And it's something that we need to engage about early on in this period. Now, given the numbers that were contained in the budget as allocations for the SHRA, and applying the current grant quantum of 426,000, we begin to see that the current pipeline of projects that have been submitted to the SHRA. There's 14 projects that have been submitted, awaiting approval. In total, they have 7,889 units. But at the current grant quantum, we are only in a position to support 5,600 units. That leaves us with a gap of 2,200 units. But even at a financial level, you have 3.3, the estimated cost of all of these projects is 3.3 billion against allocated funding of 2.3 billion, which leaves us with a funding shortfall of a billion rand. What this implies is that there has to be a measured approach in dealing with new approvals, whilst at the same time, we are cognizant of the prior year commitments. Embedded in this is that the matching principle of approving a projects in line with the funding that has been allocated to us has to form a cornerstone of what we do going forward. I think it would be irresponsible on the part of management to approve projects beyond the funding that has been allocated to us, because we would be creating obligations that down the line cannot be met. But these are part of the discussions that will be had with council, and we are targeting that these discussions must happen in April, early in the new year, so that there is clear certainty as we start the new financial year around these issues. Now, in the previous slide, talking about that measured approach, there's going to have to be some kind of a prioritization, and thinking about it, these are some of the elements. This is illustrative. It is not cast in stone in any way, to say, how do we prioritize these particular projects? Issues of geographic concentration are going to be important. We've already indicated where the pipeline sits, where it doesn't sit. We should not create the impression that social housing is a Gauteng project, is a Gauteng program. The issues of concentration, single obligors, limits that are associated with it, issues of transformation. The country is faced with a challenge of inner city degeneration. And the minister has spoken to us very sharply to say we need to look at inner city regeneration. So finding that balance between brownfield projects and greenfield projects is going to be critically important. The property management capability, a critical aspect of the social housing program, because it's not just about building. The sustainability of these projects comes in how we manage them for the next 10, 15, 20 years, and hopefully longer, and we may allocate weights to all of these things so that in this way, there's transparency around how we assess projects, how we prioritize projects. It may spit out a particular score, and this is just an illustration. I emphasize that this is an illustration. It is not cast in stone. We move to the next section, which speaks very much to some of the challenges that we are facing as a sector. And these challenges impact on sector sustainability. People in the room are faced with these challenges on a day-to-day basis. But one of them is the issue of distressed assets. Now, distressed assets, there are various contributory factors to distressed assets. Exogenous factors. These are the factors that are outside of your control. So, sites that get hijacked, or existing buildings where rental boycotts occur, and properties that get hijacked. That's one category. But there's also a category of endogenous factors where maladministration happens at a management level. Now, that maladministration triggers certain events. When you collect rent and you divert it to building your own personal portfolio, you collect rent, you don't maintain the property, you collect rent, you don't pay municipal services and they get shut off, it has implications for the tenants that reside in our units. It's a critical area that we must look at. Some of them, it becomes a combination where maladministration starts, and from maladministration, it then triggers responses from the tenants, who then withhold their rental, at times legitimately so. So I thought we should use this opportunity to highlight these things and say, these are some of the practices, particularly in this category, in these two categories, that need to be weeded out. But as the regulator, and that's another a critical element of our mandate, Section 11 and Section 12 of the Social Housing Act then enjoin us to respond in a particular manner, putting the entities into administration, conducting those forensic investigations. And to the extent that we find that, there has been embezzlement, to pursue criminal prosecutions. But because this asset has been built, then identify alternative entities to run. In these instances, there are assets that are currently under distress, and with the guidance of council, we are taking the approach that where those opportunities do come, there should be transparency around this, and there should be open expressions of interest from people in the room to assist us in taking over those assets and running them on behalf of the state. But there are also other challenges. I'm glad that we have people from the municipalities and others from the provinces. A lot of these challenges that are highlighted in this slide happen pre-delivery of the projects themselves. Where there may be delays in statutory approvals that ultimately result in cost escalations. There may be delays in meeting financial closure. This is the issue that the chairperson alluded to in terms of a misalignment between ourselves and our funding partners. Conflicts that may arise between grant recipients and their contracting partners, leading to work stoppages. Issues of rental affordability by tenants, mainly driven by municipal rates and taxes. And in this regard, there needs to be engagement, between NDHS, ourselves, and 𝐭𝐶𝐞, together with SHRA, in terms of, reclassification of social housing as an asset class. The fact that there is a 200 million rand development, it's not really a commercial development in the true sense of the word. The issues of rental boycotts and construction mafias, we have already spoken to as some of the challenges that confront the sector right now. So I thought that using this opportunity, it would be important that we reflect on these issues. And lastly, just some updates from a sector perspective. The issue of the indexation of the grant quantum and the income bands. The revised grant quantum came into effect on the 1st of April 2023, and there are projects that have already been approved at this new grant quantum. The norms and standards were gazetted in January 2023, and there will always be refinement of norms and standards to respond, and that process of refinement is one where yourselves as key stakeholders in the delivery value chain, you will be consulted on them. The draft human settlements white paper was gazetted on the 18th of December 2023. At the moment, the closing date for submission of comments is 28th of February 2024. But it is my understanding that there are requests for this deadline to be extended to allow for even more consultations to happen. But that is the prerogative of the minister. Internally, we are looking at a legislative review of the Social Housing Act and its regulations, because some of the regulatory elements impact our internal processes as the SHRA. We are hoping to take this to council as well, and if council endorses, this will then be taken through to the ministry, so that the public consultation process can then commence around it. So I thought it would be important. We were hoping on the draft human settlements paper to have a representative from the department to deliver on this. However, with all that was happening yesterday in Cape Town, we found that they were otherwise occupied. But hopefully that opportunity will present itself in the not too distant future. So with those words, I'd like to thank everyone. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, CEO, for that presentation. I do have and have acknowledged the presence of some of my council members in the session. So my council members, if there's anything that you would like to add to the presentations that will be done today in terms of our views and our position as council, you are welcome to do so. The CEO has painted a picture of our performance over the years, the past 5 years, and also focusing on the picture ahead of us. We do acknowledge the wins that we have had in the program, but also the challenges that we have at the moment. As you would be aware, we get our funding or our budget from the fiscus as this entity. Yes, there are conversations within council in terms of relooking at the funding model that we have as an entity to consider maybe some kind of external funding. Because looking at the demand versus what we can offer, we do have gaps as presented in the presentation by the CEO. He has further on indicated some of the milestones that we are looking into in terms of improving the program. He's indicated the gazetting of the new quantum, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, the norms and the standards around the delivery of social housing units, and the fact that we're looking at the Social Housing Act itself, because we do realize that some of the impediments or challenges that we have within our processes of accreditation of SHRAs and ODAs lie within the Act or the legislation that we have. And so as the entity is looking into that, we are in constant engagement with the department as well in terms of reviewing that and in terms of looking and aligning that with the policies of the department. So I think at this stage, I've seen that there are some questions that are already on the chat. I'm not sure, Ḽisikho and Mandla, whether you have taken a note of those. So we are now, I'm going to hand over to everybody and to pose their questions or to have their inquiries on the presentation that has just been done by the CEO. And any other issues that, as a result of the presentation, maybe you feel that certain things have not been addressed, whilst looking at the rest of the program as well to find your alignment. Ḽisikho and Mandla, if you can just please, I'm not sure if from my side if I'm going to be able to see all the hands, but I'm now opening up for I see a hand from Mr. Wiseman, and you'll excuse me if I'm not pronouncing your names well. Let me just try and open the. Okay, Ḽisikho, I've got a hand from Livuani, Gavin Wiseman. We'll just take about 5 people at a time, and then we'll then respond to those. So I've got Livuani, Mr. Wiseman, Papi Vesi, Nyamega, Matikizela, and Maneo. I'm not able to see all the full names in some of them, so you'll excuse me. Can the first guest just come on board?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And I would like to also say thanks to the CEO. I think the presentation is well articulated, and the picture he has portrayed, it shows a lot of future for this sector. Coming from Limpopo, I'm the new SHI. We also want to find expression to play a role in this sector, and we have got some number of projects that we have submitted. And I heard the CEO talking about the pipelines that are there within various provinces. Indeed, a lot of things are happening in Gauteng, CEO, and I think it's upon ourselves to change that picture, not to say that things shouldn't happen in Gauteng, but we would love maybe if from budgetary point of view, we start to budget maybe in terms of the province and able to follow up on programs and projects that are within various provinces, so that at least there's equitable share in terms of the budgetary allocation of the national fiscus within this sector. We also experience problems in terms of support. Maybe because we are new, we might not know how and where to touch, but we try to engage with your office on a number of occasions just to request some of the technical support, some of the professional support from your office, so that at least if there are certain areas that are still bleak on our side, we improve. But yeah, that is some of the things that some of us we are encountering. And the issue of restructuring zones, CEO, the reason why most of the things are happening in other provinces is that, for example, in Limpopo, you have got only one restructuring zone in one municipality, which is Polokwane. But you have got new emerging towns that shows potential. There's Musina, for example, which is hosting one of the biggest SEZs in the country. That place is not a restructuring zone. We have got Fitahomu, Tuvatsi. There is also a proposed SEZ that site. That area is not even a restructuring zone. But when we try to penetrate and inquire the processes for restructuring zones, application, you find that there is a lot of processes that are hanging, that are taking place. But if we don't improve in finding more restructuring zones in other provinces, projects will go to KZN and Gauteng. I'm not going to ask specific questions with our submissions. We understand the process of budgetary implication, but we would love at least to see a situation where we need to equitably try to allocate resources and support, as you have indicated in one of your slides, when you're saying we are going to engage with province and try to check what are the challenges and how can we resolve that. So basically, that is the comment that I want to share with colleagues, and able to be specific that other provinces are lagging behind. Let's try to focus and try to improve those other provinces as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Livoni. Mr. Wiseman.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, just thanks so much for the presentation, and CEO as well. It's very helpful. I think with a robust discussion that we had yesterday in our PSC in the Western Cape, the concern from our side, Chair, and I think it's shared within the sector, and CEO, you referenced that in your presentation around the projections of the CCG allocation over the next RT years. Obviously, us moving into a new MTSF period now. I think my concern that I want to raise is there seems to be quite a misalignment around what the SHRA is reflecting on a pipeline versus what's actually on the provincial pipeline. I speak obviously with us in the Western Cape, and I'm sure it's the same. I think, Chair, there certainly needs to be a growing alignment between, and I recognize that the SHRA references its projects as being active only once it comes into their system. I think our concern is how those projects do come into the SHRA system. Historically, obviously, there were I think there was biannually proposal calls, or it used to only be once a year originally, in terms of calling for new projects. But I think my concern, Chair, is the need alone in the Western Cape in the next MTSF period is for over 10,000 units. And we have a robust pipeline that's backed up by a detailed project readiness matrix. So I think the need is far bigger. And our concern, as we expressed this to our national colleagues yesterday, is how does that message get through to the relevant decision makers, both at national and at provincial treasury, in terms of the next MTech rounds of discussion. If the slide that CEO referenced, I think it was by the President, speaking about a 9 billion rand available, or 9 billion rand worth of funding. If that's private sector funding, it needs to have 3 times the equivalent within the grant space. So I think, Chair, that's the big plea from our side, particularly as the forward planning into the next MTSF period. And how do we put our hand up as the sector to say we've delivered? But not only that, how do we get alignment between the actual need based on readiness, project readiness and implementation? We've got a host of projects that are in the waiting blocks, starting blocks, rights in place, ready to go. Obviously now sitting in the bands because of the funding crisis. So I think that's just the one issue, Chair. And how do we take hands together to promote the sector into the national fiscus in a very data-driven process? And then I think, Chair, just the other comment is around sustainability. And I realize now the CEO was referencing some sort of decision matrix around prioritizing projects. We also have had the discussions with our national colleagues around some of the distressed projects and the negative perception that creates at national. I think the issue of sustainability of projects going forward will be critical. And I know as the sector's developed over all the years, the issue of number of units under management does become a key parameter that needs to be measured. And understand it creates a tension between new entrants into the sector versus those that are already there and building up a sustainable entity. So I think there is a nuance and a fine line that needs to be taken as to how to ensure sustainability, how to limit distressed projects by having sound management and sound entities. And I think just to highlight that, I think there needs to be some robust discussion and debate around any decision matrix that's made as to how do you now prioritize projects. My colleague up in Limpopo has also referenced, how does one get more sort of equitable spend across the various entities and various provinces. So thanks, Chair. Those are the main two comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next hand is from Papi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, CEO, for the presentation. It's well received. Just taking a couple of notes based on your presentation, and I think one relates to the measured approach. And I just noted with concern, obviously from a Free State point of view, up until a month ago, the company that I'm with, we were contracted to the Free State Provincial Department to assist with this very same program on social housing. But I think my concern is just around the measured approach or prioritization that you mentioned. Having looked at the presentation where the Free State, there was nothing allocated, granted its work under progress. But what concerns me is that I know we assisted the SHRA with 2 SHIs that were granted conditional approval or accreditation. Now, just taking from your presentation, does this mean that for the next MTF or within the current MTF, any project, there won't be any projects allocated to or any funding allocated to new projects, particularly in the Free State? I mean, these 2 social housing institutes, if they happen to come up with 2 projects, does that mean that they won't get any funding at all until the new allocations? And the second one, just around the distressed assets, your presentation around the exogenous factors. And I think this point came up in our last PSC while I was involved in the project or program, is around hijacked buildings and rental boycotts. What is government in general and SHRA in particular doing about this issue? Because I think it's one element that will eventually chase away new entrants into the sector. So what is government doing about it? And then I think on a side note, looking at the total units approved and completed, just your conversion rate. Not the conversion rate, the tenant into completion rate at 86%. If you look at it from a different point of view, it translates to me at least to a vacancy rate of 14%. I hope I'm wrong, but that seems extremely high. And how does that now impact your quick scan C in terms of financial modeling? Thank you, Chair.
If I may, maybe let me try and deal with this first round of questions, and then we can come again and take another round. Let me start with Libwani. Libwani, one of the presentations that you are going to receive now is from 𝐬𝐨𝐻𝐽𝐻, who runs our institution, our IIG program, that's Sector Development and Transformation, which is geared towards providing the technical support. So I would rather not respond to that one until maybe 𝐬𝐨 has actually made his presentation. But one of the challenges that we do also experience in other provinces that have a significant negative impact on approvals of projects is the issue of bulk infrastructure, that is in situ infrastructure. What you find is that at the point of approval of projects, there will be confirmation of availability of bulk infrastructure. But when you get closer to implementation, you then realize that the infrastructure is actually not in place to support the development itself. Now, that infrastructure may well be water, it may be availability of electricity, or the ability to deal with sewer and effluent water. This is a big problem. Particularly, it's highly prevalent in your smaller type municipalities. It has an impact on the picture that you saw earlier on. Now, what this means is that the issue of bulk infrastructure is not in the purview of the SHRA. We invest where the infrastructure exists. At the same time, we must be mindful that if we continue to invest where it is very clear upfront that the availability of infrastructure to support a project, 400 unit, 500 unit project, is not in place, we may end up with what is colloquially termed as a white elephant. And it's something that we must avoid. So it's a multi-stakeholder approach that is required to resolve some of these challenges that are there on the ground. And we know them. We live with them on a day-to-day basis. We experience them. Now, Andrew, you reflect on the 10,000 units and just, using just rough numbers. 10,000 units is about a 4.3 billion rand commitment to one province. That's effectively 6 years of the SHRA's allocations. So will the SHRA be able to support 10,000 units coming from one province? The immediate answer is that we do not have that capacity to do that. However, if the province of the Western Cape were to say in its budgeting, they are allocating funding to social housing that we can match on a 50-50 basis, which means we are now taking a blended kind of approach to this, then maybe we can make a significant dent to that number. There are fiscal constraints, and they are real. We showed the funding gap that we are sitting with, which is in the order of about R1 billion as we speak today. Hopefully, as the fiscal position stabilizes, that gap closes and there's more certainty going forward. But as we sit here today, those are the realities that we actually have. On the decision matrix, as I say, this is a thought process. There will be consultation around it, But that consultation first has to start at our council level, and we find alignment around it. And when that has been fully agreed, then there can be engagement at a sector-wide level. Hopefully, there will be a follow-on meeting of a similar nature when we talk about some of this and other issues that are there. Papi, the issue of rental boycotts, and maybe let me start with the easier one, the issue of the vacancy rate. Yes, if you were to use the numbers as they are, you probably would arrive at that number. I haven't calculated it, right? But remember that in this, there's also projects that are newly completed. So they may be distorting the figure. When you complete a project, maybe it will take, depending on where you are and the demand, dynamics of the area, it may take between 3 and 6 months to actually move to full tenanting. So this is a picture, it's a snapshot. If you come back probably 2-3 months down the line, you find that that gap has actually closed quite significantly. So it's not something that we are overly concerned about, but we thought it's important that we must highlight it, because critically important is that those units must be tenanted. You know, people are looking for decent accommodation, but it also assists the various delivery agents in the room with their cash flows, which ultimately should go towards debt servicing. Rental boycott, what is government doing about this? It's a very, very complex issue, this one, because the understanding the root causes of rental boycotts is also important. And I will not bore the meeting. There's a whole paper that was done between ourselves, the SHRA, as well as NATIO, as one of our key stakeholders, looking at this question of rental boycotts. Suffice to say that when this occurs, one of the critical stakeholders to bring on the table here is the criminal justice cluster. As a nation, we should be intolerant of, you know, people that feel that they can just take over buildings, whether it's a completed project or a project in construction. We should be intolerant of that kind of behavior because it creates anarchy. But the criminal justice cluster is important, is an important role player. We continuously have engagements with them where these flare-ups happen. Projects to be supported in the Free State? No. I think you probably misinterpreted the slide here. What that slide was reflecting is what is sitting in our pipeline insofar as the Free State is concerned. The projects where you have assisted the 2 SHIs that you are referring to, if they have been admitted into the pipeline, then those projects will be considered. I again come back to the decision tree, where the issue of geographic diversification may be one of the critical elements that we consider from a prioritization point of view. And you would have seen in one of the slides that an area like the Free State is one of underrepresentation. So I think that there's just that nuance that may have been lost maybe in the translation. So thank you very much. Let me see whether there's any other hands. I can't see on my side. Lesego, maybe assist.
Yes, I'm going to assist. Next we have Inyameka, and then Maneo, and then Pugiso. And then after that, those three, then we'll take the next round.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and CEO, for your presentation. I'm just going to raise 3 points or / questions. On the one hand, if one looks at the Eastern Cape, in the past 2 or 3 years, it looks like we've had 0 projects that have been past executed, and unless my eyes are deceiving me, and I saw that it amounts to 0, despite the budget itself or the projects that are desired that are sitting at 1,200, I think, beds. I'm not sure. Then in your pipeline for consideration, I didn't see the Eastern Cape in terms of the projects that are within your consideration, or call it project filters. I'm not sure if maybe you can clarify, because I think in the PSC meetings that we have quite a few projects, and that's on slide 13. Does that mean that the work that's been going there in terms of the province is not going to yield any benefits? It's not this one. I think it's the one where you have project for pipeline for consideration. What then it means is that if in your project for consideration, which excludes, I think, 2 or 3 provinces, you have the budget sitting at about 7 billion, and in your MTSF SEF approvals for the next 3 years, you're talking to 5 billion, and I'm not sure what is the thought in terms of reconciling the 2 numbers. And just note that it does exclude some of the provinces. So in your decision 3, one would hope that if the Eastern Cape and some of the provinces that are not in the pipeline for consideration, how would you bring them in to meet the desired numbers? Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go to Maneo.
No, thank you, Chair. My name is Maneo Telejane from the city of Ekurhuleni. Let me appreciate the opportunity to engage with SHRA, because as municipalities, we are requested by social housing institutions to provide letters of support. And in those letters of support, I think we have been saying that what we consider for us to be able to give the letters of support is the location of the project. In terms of the SHRA Act, that particular project has to be located within a restructuring zone. However, if we can recall, there have been priority housing development areas that have been gazetted. So when we wanted to facilitate and fast track these letters of support, previously SHRA would say their act does not necessarily recognize the PHDAs, but they do recognize only the restructuring zones. So my question is, 1, given that on slide number 17, the CEO indicated that they're undergoing legislative review, is that one of the things that they are going to include, to say if a project is situated within a restructuring zone, then as the municipality, we can give the letter of support? My other question is that when we give those letters of support, is it necessary for the municipality to consider the radius of the situation of the project? Because we have seen a situation where we have just given a letter of support one institution a month ago, then there's another request for a letter of support, but it's within the same area. So as the municipalities, should we be concerned about that, or we just issue a letter of support if it's within a restructuring zone, and we don't necessarily have to be worried about the proximity of those institutions, given that they'll be tapping from the same market. And also, I think what we also need, given that the CFO has indicated that SHRA invests where infrastructure exists. So maybe what this is saying is that there's a need to review the contents of the letters of support, so that as we give the letters of support, then maybe we can also indicate whether there will be sufficient bulk. In some instances, in a bulk would be there, but is it sufficient to cater for the additional units which are going to be developed? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll take Buchiso's question and then the CEO can respond.
Okay, good morning, CEO and Chairperson and colleagues. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible so that you don't forget my question. So I want to start with what Kevin said about the Western Cape. We have 10,000 units in our pipeline in the city of Cape Town. And the reason for that is that the city has adopted the social housing program and it wants to bump it up. And so that it is to be in the numbers that Gauteng is projecting. And so the mayor, we have a project called Mayor's Priority Program, in which we release land very rigorously to the private sector and SHIs to develop social housing. So, and as a result of that, we now have this pipeline of ready projects. We're talking about projects which are ready, 10,000 units. And now we hear that there's no budget for that. So that's a concern for us. And in respect of that, I take note to your offer or suggestion of a blended approach to deal with that 50%. And so I'm saying maybe we need to, I'm requesting that through you, Chairperson, that maybe the city, province, and the SHRA could come down and sit down and see what to do with this, to resolve this thing, because it's a serious problem. I mean, otherwise it means the city must stop its program of releasing land to the private sector and SHIs until the ones that have been released, this 10,000 has been resolved, because there's no need, otherwise it won't make sense for us to continue releasing land when the land parcels that has been released are not able to go forward. There's no money, etc., etc. So I'm pleading with you, Chair. We have not seen you, CEO, in the Western Cape. Maybe it's an opportunity. I'm inviting you. I'll host you so that we see how we can resolve that. Because, yeah, this is a serious problem for us because it means it has got serious consequences. So that's my offer and request that if you can come down and so that we sit down together and see how we can do that. Because we are planning to release more land parcels. It means that 10,000 by June or in the next financial year, it will be around 15,000 growing to 20,000. So it means otherwise we have to reverse that and see that. And those are serious consequences. And then the second question is, it relates to the same question, because we don't understand why Gauteng has got 10,000 units, is delivering 10,000, 9,000 units, you know, and we don't deliver 9,000 units. So in this question, for this one, I'm asking why is Gauteng able to do it and we are not able to do it? So my request is, you said it's population, but you know, there are many theories around that. So for this one, I request that maybe the SHRA could guide us, you know, maybe for the benefit of everybody, not only the Western Cape, but even other provinces, so that we can learn from Gauteng, what is it that they do which helps them to achieve these big numbers? We've got a pipeline, but we are not able to achieve these numbers. Gauteng, we have never seen, you know, I don't know how it happened. Is it because maybe they've got stronger SHIs or they've got a municipal entity, or is it because of ODAs? You know, so that thing needs to be documented so that it can then guide other provinces going forward. So that's my recommendation on the second one. And also the issue around investment of the SHRA. I think it's very important also to, if your research unit somehow can also assist us to show to, I know in my mind, I've seen, we've done basic calculations of the amount of investments that the SHRA attracts. to each province. For instance, in our province, if we look at the other housing program, social housing is doing a very good job in stimulating capital investment in the province using social housing program. So, but that is just something that is also very rough estimation. But it can be, if it can be documented, I'm sure it can assist us and show and try to show the need for social housing going forward. So those are my three requests and suggestions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll hand over to the CEO.
Thanks, 𝐿𝐶𝐫. 𝐿𝐶𝐫, just from a timing perspective, I don't know how we are doing for time, but I would like to, because I see a lot of hands popping up. I don't know how many questions we still have. And maybe as a suggestion is that if you know, our partners and participants in this meeting could then put their questions in the chat group, we would then respond to them if we happen to run out of time, because there are still other presentations that are going to come. I'm giving that commitment that I will respond to each and every question that gets put on the chat group, provided that we are not able to respond to them here. Now, Pogiso, maybe let me start with you. You know, when one goes back historically, the allocations to the SHRA have been around R1 billion per annum. That's the size of the envelope that National Treasury has given us, and those are the parameters within which we are then able to operate. But that envelope has to be apportioned between the 9 provinces that exist to support the pipeline and the project readiness that is there. Now, when you say that you have 10,000 units in the pipeline that are ready, in my initial response to Andrew, I just put numbers of about 4.3 billion rand of the Western Cape alone, and indicated that that is 6 years of our allocations going to just one province. It's not sustainable. And we have to be honest in these conversations and say that that level of units that are there. Yes, I acknowledge the fact that not all of them are going to come in, let's say, in the 24-25 financial year. Some may be staggered 25, 26, 26, 27, etc., etc. But the fact remains is that we just don't have an envelope that big to be able to support that legislation. Now, the other factor that you raise is the catalyzation factor that social housing brings. The need for us to be able to document this, where a project comes in and you begin to see schools mushrooming, shopping facilities, transport nodes, etc., as part of that developmental contribution that we actually make. But we need to be very clear, you know, and not claim easy victories. It's, yeah, from a research point of view, I agree with you, and it's something that we must look at. I will ask Ahmed to come in and deal with Maneo's question around the restructuring zones versus the priority high development zones. Nyameka, the Eastern Cape, these This slide reflects what is in our current pipeline insofar as the Eastern Cape is concerned. And you can see here that it's 4 projects that are registered in the Eastern Cape, yielding 3,091 units. So it's not that the Eastern Cape is not represented at all. It is represented. I think the earlier slide you were referring to, or the slide you were referring to, sorry, is this one, where, you know, in the current MTSF, the Eastern Cape had a target of 1,296 units. Out of that, 837 have been delivered to date with a negative variance of 459. So it's just maybe the two periods distinguishing what is essentially a rear view mirror here and what is potentially coming our way from the Eastern Cape, insofar as this slide actually reflects. I hope I've covered those questions, and will invite Ahmed then to come in.
Thank you, CEO and colleagues. On the issue of restructuring zones and priority development areas, it has just been also re-emphasized by National at our last rental housing task team that the SHRA is confined by its legislation. Now, there is aims and intentions for purposes to clear the process of the restructuring zones in an SOP and try and highlight areas where they intersect and align. Again, restructuring zone identification comes from a local level up through province and supported by national. So yes, it's as it is confined within the Social Housing Act. We can't invest in PHDAs which don't have restructuring zones. And then the question is, in the legislative review, this does become one of the salient questions, is the definition of social housing, whether restructuring zones then do encompass your priority development areas. And that is something we are considering. So the long and short is, yes, we still confined to restructuring zones as they are outlined in the Act. And it is one of the issues we have to consider as part of the legislative review. I hope I'm clear on that response, CEO and colleagues.
Thank you, Ahmed. So going forward, we will just limit the questions to the hands that we have now. And then the rest of the follow-up questions can go to the chat. So we'll take Yolanda, Tebogo, and Heather. Yolanda? Yolanda? Okay. Okay.
Maybe let's move to Tebogo.
Let's go to Tebogo, and then Heather.
Good morning, colleagues. I am from 𝐾𝐿 municipality. Just want to raise a few issues. With regard to our social housing program, which are happening in 𝐾𝐿, we have one registered SASWIC, and one is conditionally granted, which is your Afrikaya. So in terms of the project's outputs, we are currently expanding the 350 units in SASWIC project, and subsequent to that, through 𝐭𝐾𝐶, the HDA bought us 2 buildings. One, Transnet, which can yield easily 250 units, and then the Eskom building, which is a multi-story building, which is also being procured for us by the HDA through 𝐭𝐾𝐶 locally, provincially, which can easily yield more than 500 units. The current status of the buildings, in terms of your Transnet building, that one is being almost shred apart by these vagrants. And one, we are afraid that the Eskom building is in a good state and it's in a restructuring zone, which is the CBD, for which we intend to invite potential SHIs or use the current SHIs which we have, if they have the necessary capacity to assist with that. I just want to check from the SHRA point of view, how can you assist for us to fast track those processes going forward? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Through you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for the presentation, CEO. I have two linked questions. The first is that we have a project currently submitted and at the beginning stages of assessment. We understand that the normal program of TEC dates has been suspended to allow the SHRA leadership and council a chance to deliberate around the budget, etc. Could you please basically let the meeting know when that process would start again and what the timeframes are for projects currently under assessment? They're obviously very sensitive to inflationary impacts, and we also need to be able to keep our teams and financiers, abreast of any program shifts. And the second question is, what would be your advice to SHI and ODA developers in the room who are in advanced stages of project packaging, who had hoped to submit additional developments for consideration for CCG funding over the next 6 months, given that the dance card in terms of available funding looks pretty full at the moment? If we're not going to be able to submit developments, we need to suspend work on them. Because the nature and the shift of that development over a 6-month, 12-month, 24-month period, is significant timing-wise and finance-wise. Thank you.
Sorry, Heather. Can you repeat the second part of your question? I didn't get it clearly.
Thank you. CEO, what would be your advice to ODA and SHI developers who are busy packaging projects at the moment, who perhaps have spent a few million getting a project ready for a submission to the SHRA, given that it looks like your pipeline's pretty full against available funding already, and knowing that over a 6-month, 12-month, 24-month time frame, the difference that can make to the parameters and feasibility of a scheme. Thank you.
Okay, CEO, I'm back. Thank you, Heather, for that question. I think as Ḽiseho has already indicated, we're cutting off the hands now to the hands that we've got. I've got 3 other hands that are currently on the chat, which is Marius Muller, Mangele Muloi, and 𝐬𝐨𝐻𝑒. So we'll cut off at those 3 hands, but I'm going to give opportunity to you, CEO, to just respond to the 3 that has already been asked from you. Thank you. You're on mute, CEO.
Tebogo, on the projects that you have, the brownfields, in terms of saying how can we assist in these projects being fast tracked, I would urge that you and 𝐸VALT is going to come in now, that you engage with 𝐸VALT and his team, who can be instrumental in assisting, looking at the stage of where the projects are, what assistance may be required to fast track them and get them through the process. But equally, that assessment will also look at the issues of statutory approvals, to say where are you in relation to those. We run through the SD&T, a municipal support program, where we nurture these relationships, because municipalities are a critical role player in that value chain. So 𝐸VALT would be the right person to actually engage with and take it from there. Heather, it's difficult for me to actually give you advice on what you must do, because it's a business decision. I have a responsibility to the sector to paint the picture and the constraints within which we actually operate. Because giving you advice, amongst other things, would be that one may even be saying that when that project is ultimately ready, then it would automatically be funded. Now, we are not even at that stage. Part of being in business is that you take risks, but you must assess those risks. Part of this session is to give you that information and paint the landscape so that you can make informed decisions for yourself. So it would be remiss of me to actually give you that kind of advice. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I've covered that. I don't know whether, because there was Yolanda earlier on, but yeah, I hope I've covered all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. If anyone feels that the questions have not been fully covered, if you can then just write it on the chat, obviously giving the background to the question that you had asked where you feel unanswered. So I see one of the hands has just disappeared now. So I've got 2 hands up. We're going to take those hands and close it. Then CEO responds to that, and then we'll go to the next presentation. Thank you. Marius, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just a question regarding the scorecard, because there's going to be a risk assessment tool for submitting. When will that scorecard be implemented? And how soon would we be able to get the score back from SHRA to know whether we'll have success in terms of submitting it? So the selection process, just some clarity around that, and when it will begin, as well as existing projects. Will those fall within that assessment as well, or is there a different set of criteria that will be applied to those? Thank you.
Thank you, Marius. Smangele?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Mangele from eThekwini Municipality. So mine is probably to just update the chairperson in regards to the social housing and the interventions so far to date that have not yielded social housing units. So in eThekwini, we really went for it when they said inner city regeneration. So we identified 4 buildings that were located in the inner city. Trust me, it wasn't easy because we were competing with economic development, but nonetheless, we were given the priority. So we took over those 4 buildings and they were then allocated to SHRs since 2018. There were 3 major problems since the allocation to SHRs. One was the AMAFA issues. It's not easy and quick to get AMAFA approval. The second one was that the buildings were invaded. So upon us profiling those people that were inside those buildings, we found that they don't even qualify for social housing. So they require alternative accommodation. To this day, we have not been assisted by the province or national for funding for alternative accommodation. But the last one is the cost of a high-rise building in the inner city. It's about plus or minus, based on the BOQs that have been supplied by the SHIs, the cost is plus or minus 650,000. And at this juncture, if you look at the subsidy quantum plus the 30% debt equity, there's no further incentives for the SHIs to borrow more on the inner city buildings. So we're not reaching financial closure on the inner city buildings. So I'm requesting that the SHRA comes closer to assisting us in realizing the inner city regenerations. Most of these buildings have to be demolished because they are seriously run down. So it's not an upgrade, it's not a repartitioning, it's a demolish and rebuild. And oftentimes in the inner city, we require more than a 4-story walk-up. So generally we're looking at a minimum of a 12-story building, and that's why the costs are where they are. So I mean, the city manager just the other day was saying to us, you know, if we're not moving in social housing, might as well he takes back these buildings and gives them to economic development, because by now he should be getting or collecting more rates. And it's even worse that going forward, we might even be requesting a concession that, you know, the social housing buildings are rated differently. So we're taking long to convert this, but also even going forward, we may be asking for more concessions, but I don't know if we'll ever be able to realize these opportunities. So I also am very concerned about the slow progress around our inner city social housing opportunities that have been created in eThekwini. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Smangele. CEO.
Thank you, Chair. Marius, look, the full impact of, in one of my earlier slides, I did indicate that we need to take a measured approach around the issues of the funding gaps, new approvals, previous commitments that have already been made, but also how we prioritize going forward. And indicated there that we're looking at taking all of these things to our council in April, in the April round of meetings, as the ultimate custodians of institutional strategy and what needs to happen. So hopefully after April, provided that there is consensus around how we should move forward, that's more or less the timeline, you know, that we are working towards. Smangele, the issues, the dynamics of AMAFA and the other things that you refer to, I'm not familiar with, but I will then engage with the colleagues internally who may have the historical background to this, and then revert to you on it. But you know, looking at the other issue that you raise, which speaks to inner city regeneration, that maybe the state of the buildings that are earmarked for these purposes is such that, maybe to use the term differently, is that they are effectively condemned buildings. Because if you really have to demolish it and start from scratch, it's at a point of being condemned. Sitting here without knowing the full facts of it, I would say that, yeah, at 650,000 Rand a redevelopment cost, it sounds pretty expensive, particularly for the market that we actually service, and the economics of it would not support that level of investment on a per unit basis. However, I'm happy for us to take this offline and unpack it a bit more. That would be my high level response. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you to our guests for the questions that they've posed. As I said when I first opened the session, is to say that we are seeking to engage with you so that we can understand where the issues are. We may not be able to respond to everything as of today, but we take note of the issues that you are raising. And I think my council members, as I've indicated, some of them are here. In particular, Mr. James Mabua, Ms. Lahlane Malema, Dr. Mandla Khadebe, and Mr. 𝐭𝐻𝐭𝐭𝐡𝐞𝐵, those that I've seen on the chat. My fellow council members, you'll excuse me if I haven't called out your name, but we are all in the session today. But what I also want to maybe highlight or indicate is that the minister is currently, we ourselves, including the minister, we are currently planning another session where the minister needs to engage, should like to engage with the SHIs and the ODAs in an open session where you can table out some of these issues. As I said, that the relationship is not just between us and yourselves, but the entire sector. So the National Department of Human Settlements has to come on board to listen to the issues and find ways in how the minister and the department can intervene in some of these issues. So it's not all doom and gloom that we don't have the answers to your questions, but there is a hope for a better or a bigger engagement directly with the minister, which is going to happen soon. So please look out for that. We will keep in contact as an entity as well. We do have the database that we have now. So do look out for that. Without wasting much time, can we move on to the next presentation by Mr. 𝐬𝐨𝐬𝐷 who is the executive for sector development and transformation in the entity. 𝐬𝐨𝐬𝐷, if you can take us through your presentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to everyone. In terms of the brief that I was given, it is about talking to yourselves about the building of a sustainable relationship with our funders, and to just share with you some of the thoughts that we've had on how we streamline our processes and how do we foster alignment and efficiencies. So really, I think what's important for us in that context is to say to you that we do believe that this must be a programmatic approach. Even though we invest and we regulate and we enable, these must be consolidated in an integrated way where one supports the other. And therefore, it's really about addressing the entire life cycle of a project, from the concept to when it becomes a tenanted project. The importance of that really is that we have to enable throughout. We have to accredit and approve well. We have to plan and construct well. We have to tenant well, and we have to manage well. I'm talking about we as a sector and not necessarily only the SHRA, because ultimately, as the investor and the regulator and the enabler, we obviously have to partner and ensure that we work with the provinces, municipalities, and the delivery agents to do that. The other thing that I think is important in the context of what I am saying is that we are also considering the challenges that we've had over the past few years. And what's important for us is to take some of the lessons that we've learned on board and to see, so what do we change in the way that we do things? And in that context, the CEO has also spoken about the sector sustainability, the distressed assets, where sometimes things are not necessarily inside of our control, but there's things that we can do as a sector to proactively see that we can avoid those circumstances. Mention was made of the strategy related to rental boycotts. I think that's one example. I think where things are in our control and what we have found to be important for us to play a more prominent role in and create or have more focus on would be in the initial stages of the institutions and the projects when it comes to who do we accredit, what is our requirements, and the projects themselves, what is it that we approve, or all of the boxes ticked in terms of those. And really, in that context, we've amended our policies and procedures in the recent final year, where it really is more about the alignment between the different units in the SHRA, for us not to do things in isolation, but rather work together in the context of the different requirements. So when we talk about an integrated approach, I think the starting point of all of that is really, so what is it that a delivery agent would require from us? By speaking about a delivery agent, I'm referring to social housing institutions, I'm referring to municipal-owned entities, as well as private sector participants, or as we know them in the Act, other delivery agents. I think it's important that we consider that throughout the process. In other words, not only when we accredit or approve, but also when we move with these entities and institutions throughout the life cycle. And we must link this in a way to the delivery of successful social housing. In that context, you know, it's not a question of capacitating and supporting the sector for the sake of giving support. The support that we give needs to culminate in the delivery of well-functioning social housing units with happy tenants in those units. So in the context of what the institutions require, we have to always keep the success that we need to achieve in mind. And our work with the provinces and municipalities and government in general becomes important for us. Mention was made of Eskom building earlier on, the one in 𝐿𝐵𝐸𝐾𝐿. I do know that we were involved as the SHRA initially when the Housing Development Agency was in the process of doing the preliminary assessments. But it is work that we need to take forward in the context of, so now we have the building, and ultimately, how do we ensure that we deliver a social housing project? And I do want to invite the officials to talk to us about what the way forward is and how do we assist as the regulator to be able to facilitate that. I think what's also important for us in terms of an integrated approach is really to build appropriate capacity. Now, what I mean with that is sometimes we do see that there's a lot of focus on policies and procedures, but not necessarily enough focus on what the governance arrangements are, whether there's sufficient knowledge on board and management level when it comes to the implementation of social housing. And that means we have to change the way in which we accredit the institutions so that it really becomes a partnership instead of a name on a list in the context of delivery. Because if you don't know your partners, you don't know them in the context of the delivery, firstly, but secondly, the potential for things to go wrong, you don't identify and you don't mitigate those from the outset. So those partnerships are becoming increasingly important for us in the context of the delivery of social housing. And it really is also about, so how do we deal then with the two major stumbling blocks for the new entrants, and for that matter, for others as well. And it talks to land and projects on the one side, and it talks to the finance or the debt or the equity on the other side. And the important part is that we acknowledge the importance of government when it comes to making land and projects available, firstly, but then secondly, we build some level of assurance together with our financial partners in the context of the capacity that we create for the sector, for these agents that we partner with to deliver social housing, so that it's not separate from the projects themselves and from the success that we achieve, but that it contributes to that in a way where the financiers are also comfortable with the work that we are doing. We've done some work on incubation together with the NHFC on that, and we've had some success, but we do want to roll that out a lot more going forward. And that also relates to how we support project readiness and feasibility, because ultimately those questions that the Smangele talked about feasibility of a project, we need to ensure that we answer those right from the outset and that they don't become issues later on in a project where the expectation was created and the projects are then not able to be delivered. I did mention this earlier, and I think it is important in the context of social housing to really see that we keep on supporting. What we've seen in terms of lessons learned is sometimes we support right at the beginning, and then things go wrong and the SHRA would have to intervene. I think the approach is that the support that we give needs to start from the outset, where we build the capacity of the institution, not only to develop the project, but also to tenant it and to manage the project in the context of the compliance of the project to our criteria, and having tenants living in those units and being able to afford and pay their rent. So in that context, the approach says, let's focus on continued supporting to the institutions. Similarly, when it comes to the projects themselves, the development support that we give during the initial stages, we need to pull through to the design concepts, but also to implementation of the projects. In other words, when they hit ground and when they have to be completed. And we have to see what kind of support we give in those implementation stages as well. It's important that, as I said earlier on, we do this in an integrated way where accreditation in the SHRA does not sit on their own. Project development and funding would not sit independently from everyone else. Compliance is part of all of us in the context of where institutions are being perceived as non-compliant, where we investigate, where we determine whether any support or intervention or remedial action would be required. And then finally, when things go wrong, we have to also look at regulatory enforcement. But I think the important part really is that if we focus more on the accreditation side and what our partners require, and making sure that we address all of those from the outset, and similarly with the projects, then hopefully we can deal with some of the regulatory enforcement that we've seen in the recent past that we are struggling with and that we have to address at a very late stage when the projects are already and the units and the buildings are already in distress. And therefore, I think it needs to be the appropriate support at the right time and not just right at the end of it. The last slide just indicates the different grants that we give. I'm not necessarily going to go through the detail of this, but I think what's important in terms of pre-accreditation support and seed funding and incubation and accelerator support is that this also incorporates levels of training and skills development and transfer. And there's also levels of mentoring. I've seen some requests in the comments and we'll certainly follow up on those. But I think the important part of all of this is also that we learn from what we've seen, where we would have specific areas of concern in the sector when it comes to, for instance, the governance arrangements and making sure that those are correctly in place for our partners. and also assisting and supporting to ensure that those can be complied with. Again, on tenant management, we do find that some of our partners do a great job. Some are struggling, and it's important that together with other role players in the sector, such as NASHO, the National Association of Social Housing Organizations, we facilitate and we create the partnerships between the well-performing and the ones that are learning for those kind of issues to be addressed and for best practice to be shared between our partners. And in that context, we also have to see how we partner with others, and we're busy with the Institute of Human Settlement Practitioners at the moment, where we do believe it's important for the sector to open up in terms of partnerships and ensure that we find the right skills and we're able to give those skills through to our partners in the delivery of social housing. When it comes to project packaging and feasibility support, again, as I said earlier on, this is not just initial, but it goes throughout the project life cycle. And it also goes towards project development and implementation support. We do have staff gear-up support, which we can share details with those that would be interested. And then the focus really at the moment, to a large extent, has really also become compliance support in the context of the lessons that we've learned, where we do want to support the institutions that are raising issues or where issues are raised of non-compliance, because if we can deal with those earlier on, it does mean that we don't necessarily enter the remedial action stage, which is really the last resort before the regulatory enforcement. And therefore, in terms of the program itself, the focus to a large extent has now moved to be more proactive right at the beginning of processes, but also to provide support and funding for the compliance issues that we currently sit with, so that we can address those and get the projects that are in distress back to a stage where those can, in fact, be managed properly and successfully. Thank you, Chair. That's the presentation from my side.
Chair, you're on mute.
I think she's having mic problems in the chat.
Was it?
All right. All right. The chair has indicated that she's having challenges with her mic, so she's going to exit the meeting and then come back quickly.
I see a few hands whilst the chair is reconnecting. I saw Stakeholder. I'm seeing Libuani. Maybe let's start with those two. whilst there's 𝐵𝐸𝐺𝐻𝐺𝐻 as well. We'll take those three whilst the chair tries to reconnect. Stein?
Hello, sir, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Letuli and 𝐬𝐨𝐻𝐺𝐠, and also the chairperson. I think the underlying message which we got this morning was somewhat of a cautionary approach, and I'm just always trying to stay on the positive side, you know, and I would like to say, first of all, thank you very much for all the good work that the team at the SHRA is doing for us, also including your work, sir, and also Mr. 𝐬𝐨𝐻𝐾𝐿𝐻, etc., etc. So we would like to be part of the team, and we would like to forge ahead. So just one or two quick comments from my side on a positive note. I think there is at provincial level quite a bit of support available to possibly extend the funding position, which you referred to before. I think that also we should be approaching the minister and government into this extent, because they are saying in different platforms, especially now with the budgetary speech very recently, that infrastructure spend should be increased to get our South African economy to grow not at 1%, but at 2 and 3%, which will give us a very positive South Africa going into the future. So I think the timing is good for us to accelerate the SHRA process, and we would like to engage with the minister if possible. And we have economists and people advising us on these issues, and we are more than happy to make those available, those resources available to also, Mr. Letuli, assist you and the SHRA to continue the good work and to accelerate the good work that you've been doing. And we are part and parcel of that. We come through a very difficult period with COVID that enormously affected the growth curve, which was available 3 and 4 years ago before COVID with the SHRA. And I think we are in a recovery process, and you know, the challenge is going to be to get government, I think, to support the SHRA more. So just like an overall observation saying, I think we shouldn't be negative. I think we should be positive. We should be bullish, because the requirement out there, and you also see it in the number of projects submitted, pipeline projects, etc. There's a wonderful SHRA initiative that works and works well and can work in future as a catalyst also to make a big impression. And we are your biggest supporters, so please engage with us if you can assist in any way. We would like to do that. We would like to be part of a team effort unlocking funding for this great initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stein. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. And the next in line is 𝐵𝐸𝐺𝐻𝐺𝐻.
Chair, I'm also trying to raise my hand. Thank you. My name is Yanda.
Yes, no. We can see the hands. They do come up. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thanks for the presentation. Good morning, colleagues. Chair, I just want to inquire, Chair, about the incubation program. I'm aware that we were supposed actually to be part of this program sometime last year, and it never happened. So there was a lot that was happening internally. is it possible that we can get, Chair, the timeframes when we can expect this program to be actually active and getting the coaching and mentorship as SHI and ODA? Lastly, Chair, secondly, in terms of the Landoza, Chair, project packaging feasibility support, we had a workshop sometime last year that was actually conducted by SHRA, and there were issues that were raised in regards to the project feasibility grant, Chair, as SHIs and ODAs, because we were not happy with the way it is actually designed. Because you will recall that as SHI, we have professional teams who are packaging this project to make sure that we are compliant. And now SHRA, in terms of this project packaging feasibility support, they will appoint a consultant that will have to come and do the work that has been done already. So I just want to find out, Chair, if is there maybe a progress or update in regards to that, because it was resolved that this matter is going to be tabled in a council so that it can be revisited in terms of the project packaging. Those are the two issues that I wanted to raise now, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity.
For that question, can you hear me? Can someone make an indication if they can hear me?
We can hear you.
Loud and clear, Chair.
Yes,
Okay,
Chair.
Thank you. We'll take the next question from Johan Potgieter. We've got two other hands that are up. After the hand from Mr. Potgieter, we'll then take responses from either the CEO or 𝐸𝐸veld, and then we'll take the two hands and we'll cut the hands off there at Lula Makawa. Or I think there was someone else who indicated that their hand was up, but I'm not too sure.
It's Yanda Mjegula. Yeah.
So we'll take the third hand then from Yanda after this round of responses after Johan. Then we'll close it and then we'll go to the next presentation. Thank you, Johan. You can go ahead.
Chair, quick one. It's Yanda. Mine has been covered by the previous. I think it's true. I can't remember. It's exactly on the issue of project packaging that the issue was raised on the workshops. We have raised the issue on the professional steering committees that the way they're doing it, it does not work for anybody. I think True has actually covered me on that one. But just for emphasizing it, it is a problem for guys on the ground who are doing the actual work. SHRA, instead of SHRA giving money to consultants, why are they not giving to us, the developers? Thank you.
Okay, noted. Thank you, Yanda. Then we've got two other hands after Johan. We've closed in now for the hands. Johan, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. This is actually Stakeholder MCD, Johan's colleague. We are from the CROE group. Thank you very much for the informative and insightful discussion this morning. We just wanted to know that when will we be able to get when will be the SHRA be in a position to notify the delivery agents on the verification sitting dates for MENCO, SCO, on the QSA, PAC and TEC on the QSB and QSC, PDFC on the QSB and QSC, and CAR on the QSA with the SHRA Council. Additionally, we would like to find out the provincial steering committee date scheduled for this fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As 𝐸𝐸veld and CEO, if you can respond to those questions.
I think 𝐸𝐸veld should be able to handle these things.
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Chair. So I think from my side, thank you, Mr. Fourie, for your comments. On the inquiry about the incubation program, what has happened on the incubation program is that we are coming to the end of the existing incubation program by the end of this financial year, and we're starting with a process of identifying new participants, and we'll invite those in terms of a list of criteria to then see how do we take incubation forward in the next financial year. So the participants can look out for that probably around April, May, in terms of those invitations coming through for participation in the incubation program. Secondly, on the issue of the professional teams and the project feasibility grants, what's important to bear in mind is that as part of the consolidated capital grant, there's also a percentage allocated to professional teams. And I do understand, having been a service provider myself, that work on risk is not always something that is done and that can be done. But in the context of using the service providers of others, it's important for the SHRA to align to the requirements of the PFMA when it comes to appointment of service providers. Therefore, we have to go through a procurement process when we do appoint service providers. What I have found in cases where service providers have been appointed or recommended have also been that when a service provider or companies are involved in a project, they are able to provide the required proposals, be considered to be appointed by the SHRA to actually do the work. And those have been successful in the past. I have been involved in some of those. I think it's important that we do ensure that we are compliant. And what I would suggest that the service providers acting on behalf of the developers do is to ensure that they're registered on CSD and that they're part of the panels of the SHRA when it comes to the issue of proposals for work to be undertaken, because that ultimately is the way that we have to do it. To answer the question about the giving the funding to the developers, initially, before the Social Housing Act was implemented in the Social Housing Foundation days, the capacitation work was done in that way, but it was specifically changed in the Social Housing Act to say that the regulatory authority must, through grants to service providers, support the sector to submit viable project applications. So that's the way that it's currently written. We are re-looking at it as part of the legislative review and seeing what it is that we need to do to perhaps accommodate and deal with those challenges that have been placed in front of us by the developers, and seeing how we link the feasibility support to the ultimate consolidated capital grant support, because you can also not have different service providers working on the same project, because it just, from a financial point of view, wouldn't make a lot of sense. So we have taken that on, and we are looking at how do we address that, because it currently, as we sit, is legislated in the way that we implement it. But we are doing a legislative review. And then finally, on the question about the dates and the schedules, I think my comment at this stage would be that it's important for us to first, as the CEO pointed out, deal with what it is that we are doing from a prioritization and project point of view in terms of future funding, for us to then confirm what those dates are. What I can, however, say to the participants that have worked with us over the years is that our council and our committees meet on a quarterly basis. And we do have the meetings in preparation for those committees and councils within each quarter. So that does mean that if there are projects or institutions that are considered, that those can in fact be processed in a quarter, which would be between April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, or January, February, March. In terms of the PSC Provincial Steering Committee date schedules, I think those would be run by the provinces, but we can certainly engage with the different provinces and see whether, as a sector, we can get those dates confirmed for the next financial year, so that we all have certainty about the dates for the provincial steering committees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, 𝐸𝐴𝐺𝐵.
Chair.
Yes.
Can I just have a minute before the CEO starts?
I'm not sure now who's talking.
Oh, Yanda again, Chair.
Yanda,
Yes, Chair.
can we just, we had hands up. I know you've indicated your point already. Can we just give Lula Makawa first an opportunity, and then you can come afterwards, and then we'll close on the questions.
Thank you, Chair.
Lulama, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just a quick one. Chair, I was sort of worried about the presentation developed, because in as much as there's great support that he has outlined, you say the biggest problem, Chair, that we're sitting with as service providers, as SHIs, is the turnaround time within which that support comes to us. And it was, his presentation was sort of silent on that. If you can just give an indication on their turnaround times on each support, and what are they putting in place to make sure that those time frames are shortened, because in this industry 6 months and 12 months are a very long time. A lot changes within that time, and we need to manage that very closely. That's my proposal. Thanks.
Thanks, Lulama. Yanda, you can come in and then we close on the questions. Yanda? Okay. 𝐸𝐴𝐺𝐵, can you just respond to that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thanks for that one. I missed it. It was not intentionally. I do have, in fact, an answer, and I do acknowledge that in the past we have not been very good with our turnaround times. What we've done to improve on that is to look at what it is that we put in our delegations of authority in terms of the approvals required to give support, so that these things go to the executives instead of to committees for decisions, firstly, which would make the turnaround times much better. We've also, in terms of the policy that the council have approved, confirmed our turnaround times in terms of the policy that from the date that we receive a request, we need to provide an answer to an institution at the longest within with a decision within 60 days. But we are working towards seeing whether we can shorten that even to 30 days in the context with what I've just said. What we've also realized is that the turnaround time also comes in where the support has already been approved, but then a service provider needs to be approved. And then there's a long lag in the procurement process. We've developed a panel of service providers, and we're at adjudication stage at the moment for that panel to be appointed, which will then mean that we won't have that lag going forward in terms of having given or approved support and then being able to roll out those the support to the institutions. So we have addressed that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, 𝐬𝐵𝐺𝐬. Maybe the last call on Yanda, if he is around. Yanda, are you there? Can you just...
Yes, I'm back. I was temporarily removed, and then I think they've allowed me back in.
Okay, sure. Please go ahead.
Chair, what I'm saying, and what the others are saying, and what's been said on a number of occasions. For example, the other speaker mentioned the workshop that they had, I think, in the Eastern Cape. I was on another workshop as well by SHRA here in Gauteng, in Midrand, on various meetings during the provincial steering committees. The same issue has been raised, is that as a developer, you come, you bring in a project. You've got a group of consultants that you have, for example, the QS. The QS does the work halfway and says, look, I've been doing the work with you not paying the full amount. I can't go any further. Then the project kind of delays. SHRA says that no, due to PFMA, they must have a panel of consultants. Our consultants must join those panels, then they appoint them. Now we're saying that if we already have consultants on our teams, if SHRA takes the project, there is no need to go and appoint a different QS, a different engineer, a different this and that for the same project. There's already consultants, professionals, registered QS engineers and all of that, who are more than capable with experience and expertise to do this. Why can't SHRA say, look, okay, fine, here's your project, here are consultants, let them do the work, and SHRA will pay them direct. We'll pay the company, then you can pay the consultants, or even they pay them direct instead of saying go to the panel, then we'll appoint from the panel. Then number two, on the same thing that they do, there are companies. For example, I remember one of the companies in PE whereby they were told that a consultant has been appointed in October. 5 to 6 months later, there was nothing still. So the timelines become too long, 6 months. So why create unnecessary bottlenecks instead of trying to assist us to move the projects smoother? Then also number three, the verse speaks about, it says that the legislation says they must give support for sector development. There's nothing that says that you cannot give support direct to the companies, rather than bringing a consultant. Why can't that support goes direct to developers so that we can have projects going? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Yanda. 𝐬𝐵𝐺𝐬, I'm not sure if you can respond to that, or the CEO. I think Leboa, who is executive for the project development and funding project, where then the use of the consultants from our side as SHRA is being used. Maybe Leboa, if you have something to add on that, I would appreciate that you can come on board, please, if you are around. 𝐬𝐵𝐺𝐬 or CEO, can you respond to those queries that have been raised by Yanda?
Chair, if I may, from my side, I do acknowledge what has been said, and what I have said is that we will address that in terms of the legislative review. Section 11.3A of the Social Housing Act prescribes the way in which we can give support. So, in fact, we are limited by the legislation in the way that we give the support. We've tested this before. It was ruled as irregular expenditure. And that's why it's important for us to, in the legislative review, address this matter in terms of the support that we provide. I'm not saying we cannot appoint the service providers of the existing company. We can. There are ways to do that. It's just important that we follow the correct procedures when we do, and that we ensure that we are still able to meet the requirements that we need to meet when it comes to having gone through a procurement process or having vetted a procurement process for the appointment of those service providers. But we are addressing that, and we will take that further internally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, 𝐬𝐵LT, for that response. I see there's a hand up, but I'm unable to see whose hand that is. Lesego, can you assist me there?
Chair, it's 𝐭𝐨𝐫𝐤𝐴𝐧𝐠, if you will recognize me.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay.
Kevin is one of our council members. You can go ahead, Kevin.
I just want to caution that we are not creating expectation that we will pay for service providers. It's an industry norm that because we are providing the funding, and therefore you need to manage and protect the institution against allowing, because we need to ensure that that's especially the professionals, that those professionals provide an independent and a professional assessment of work done and those things. So I just want to caution that we don't create an expectation today that we will appoint professionals that are reporting to the SHI or to the ODA. And so, because in the industry we do have that separation of who are you accountable to, and so even though there may be from executive side trying to find a way to assist the SHI, I just want to caution against that. In the industry, it is a bit, it's quite difficult sometimes. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Kevin, for that. I'm not sure if there are any other hands. I don't see any. Lesego, before I let you on, I think I also just want to support what Kevin has said. Remember, there has to be some level of independence in all the processes that we do, and so I think it's important to distinguish between the interests of each party in the value chain. So some of the things, yes, we understand they are sometimes creating a bottleneck within the processes, but they need to be done for the sake of being sure that we as an entity are covered from all angles. But as 𝐸𝐵LT has responded to the matter, maybe in the review of the legislation itself, there may be ways that can be found to actually remove such bottlenecks, but without compromising on the independence of the process and how we as the entity cover ourselves and what we are responsible for in terms of the grant itself. Thank you, Lesego.
Chair, I think that hand was a mistake. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. There was a moment where Lesego shared her email address on the chat so that you can forward any other questions to her. We've taken note of those that are in the chat, and due to time constraints, we may not be able to respond to everything, but we do take note and acknowledge those that are on the chats. So we haven't lost those. So at this moment, we're going to invite Dr. Misoveni Ngobeni from the Infrastructure Fund, who is a lead program management specialist, to take us through his presentation from the perspective of funders now that are outside SHRA, but that are also part of our stakeholders in terms of providing funding to our SHIs and ODAs for the part that we as SHRA cannot provide as a grant. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Ngobeni. You may go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to test if you are able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Chair, I would like to start by greeting you as the chairperson of council, but also other SHRA council members, the executives present here, as well as other, senior officials within government and in the private sector. I've been requested to, talk more around the risks that are affecting bankability of social housing projects. But before I do that, I would like to indicate that, my presentation will attempt to provide solutions to most of the challenges that have been flagged by the CEO, because from where we are sitting, we understand that the SHRA is constrained from a fiscal point of view. However, there are ambitions to be able to grow bigger than what the SHRA is now, aligning to the needs of individuals on the ground, as well as needing to respond to the project pipeline that is coming on from the developers who are present here on the call. So I will strive to, talk to what we call the intermediate phase of social housing in trying to provide solutions in that regard. So my presentation really is not that long, basically context and background issues, and I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on that because the CEO, eloquently talked to those issues. I'll touch a bit more on, bankability risks and mitigation, as well as the impact of the interventions that we are putting forward. So based on, stats that we are gathering at different points, when I looked at what the CE presented, it means that we are, delivering just about 2,600, 2,700 units per year at current rates on average. And if that is the case, we are struggling to really meet those MTSF targets that are being set. I think he reflected that we are lagging behind in the current 2019-2024 MTSF. So our intervention really, you'll start to see as I go into the next slides, it attempts to ensure that the SHRA meets target within the new MTSF. And we are going to request the SHRA to try and also conceptualize this outside the budget constraints. So conceptualize a program that will respond to the challenges, and we collectively address the issue of funding the growth aspirations that the SHRA is having. And Chair, I need to indicate that growth will only happen if we are able to catalyze investment and financing, but also address some of the bankability challenges that are currently negatively affecting the sector. Most private players are not willing to come and play in the space because of those issues. I'll touch on them just recently. I think the crux of the matter of this slide is just to indicate that we are persistently not meeting the targets in terms of units. And as a result, we have to revise them downwards all the time, and also emphasizing the budget constraints that are existing. So as the infrastructure fund, we opted not to sit on the sidelines. We opted to become a partner who would offer solutions to the SHRA. So the first intervention that we put up early in 2021, we went to the budget facility for infrastructure, which is a facility that is run by National Treasury, to request 305 million to be able to support around about 4 to 6 social housing projects. This is just for the 30% of the requirements that they will need to draw from the market, given that the CCG would cover the 70%. That application was successful, and we have now started to deploy these resources into projects. Actually, one of the projects, the Goodwood social housing project, reached financial close last year, and we are currently deep into disbursements. I think we are into our third disbursement, just to enable that construction can be finalized. With this 305 million, Chair, we also paid school fees in the sector because we are a new player in the social housing space. We are not as experienced as other players like DBSA, NHFC. So we had to learn around what makes it to work and what doesn't make it to work. As you can see, we started in 2021, but really fruits are starting to bear now in 2024. So we are deploying what we call short-term bridge facilities to the project, which will be refinanced after 4 years. So having addressed all the bankability issues, we anticipate that financiers who would have originally played in the space will now have interest to come in and take over the debt. And we can take the funding that we have and reflow it into other projects. But if you look at the intermediate phase, Chair, it doesn't have scale because you're talking about 4 to 6 projects. So essentially, we're still talking about 4,000 units when these projects are completed. They are not enough to eradicate the backlogs. Then we said said we can think about a more progressive phase, which is this phase 2, the intermediate phase, where we crowd in development finance institutions at scale to come and rally behind a pool of projects on a programmatic basis. Because what we experienced is that financiers tend to cherry pick good projects and they will leave out those that are struggling for their own purposes and reasons. They are in the business of making money. However, as government, that doesn't serve our interests, doesn't serve the interests of the poor on the ground. It also doesn't serve the interests of transformation. So in the intermediate phase, we are targeting about 10 to 15 projects all at once, which this funding from the DFIs can help to catalyze this investment. So it essentially means that we also need to look at how best do we complement the CCG, which is already constrained. And Chair, I can already tell you now, if we look within the vote, there are inefficiencies which can be redirected to help us with the crowding effect in relation to the intermediate phase. In the next slide, I'll go at it at length so that you can see what we have done so far, because we have said to you, we are appointing a competent transaction advisor to be able to advise us on how best to package this intermediate phase. And this was as a result of discussions that we had with these DFIs. So DBSA, NHFC, we also talked to multilaterals as well as MDBs, like the New Development Bank. We also talked to institutional investors and pension funds who said, appoint a transaction advisor who would really be independent, be able to package this thing so that we all look at it with a fresh pair of eyes later on. And then we do have the appetite to participate if all the bankability issues are really addressed. So that is exactly what is happening now. The last one is phase 3, which is going to be a long-term kind of phase where we have a vision, Chair, that once we have addressed the bankability issues, the commercial banks, internet financiers, and everyone else who's been, doubtful to participate in the space are now able to come in because the factors that were vitiating efficiency have been addressed, and now they are able to deploy their resources in an environment that is investable, also operating in an efficient manner. So this is just a summary, Chair, of that short-term phase. I think I've tried to capture what we have done so far. So basically, we're looking at currently where we are at disbursements, as I said, on Goodwood. Hospital Street, we are addressing some of the financial close conditions. We're anticipating that once addressed, it will be able to reach financial close. And Chair, just reiterating what was said earlier, for example, some of the issues that stumble blocks there were issues pertaining to regulatory requirements related to EIAs and water use licenses. And you can imagine dealing with those now late on in the financing process. I think we need to find processes where we harmonize this so that these are addressed upfront. There are also issues around lease agreements, land lease agreements, and requirements for approvals from National Treasury, which are also negatively affecting the project. But the approach that we took as the infrastructure fund, we didn't take the approach of lenders, where we would have said, because this and that is not in place, therefore we are working away. We are hand-holding the SHRA responsible to be able to address those issues. So that should reflect to you that for one to be successful and address bankability issues in this program, you also need to wear the head of a partnership. And that is the approach that we have really taken across the social housing program. And we think it is an essential ingredient for it to succeed even going forward. Chair, in relation to progress on the intermediate phase, I'm happy to indicate that, even after delays around the procurement of the transaction advisor, we have now appointed Pins and Masons to be able to be our lead advisor to really structure this intermediate phase that I have spoken about. And you can see some of the critical path kind of items that are here, which will be able to help us, to package this in a proper manner. Where we are, they have currently, done some inception work in relation to the situational analysis. Interviews with the SHRA and ourselves have already happened, and they are now doing a preliminary kind of preliminary stage report to detail their findings, which the bankability issues that I'm going to present just now are coming from there. And Chair, you can see that if successful, the intermediate phase will kick in the heart of the new MTSF. And this is where we are saying we want to assist the SHRA to be able to realize its growth strategy, but we realize that it will need money to be able to do that. And it's not only the issue of money, there are non-monetary variables that we need to deal with, and they come up in this bankability risk matrix that I'm going to just now. Chair, our advisors have picked up some of the issues that are reflected on the slide. Uncertainty in government funding and reductions. The CEO spoke at length about that. I will not really repeat it. The other point is that the affordability and rental income challenges, given the income bands that we are looking at, the people who are there with changing variables, including the developers who are running the project, there are affordability issues that they're dealing with. It does affect the financial modeling of projects. As a result, the financial models are not able to stack up. So you really need a financier who will really understand these issues. And what we have done in our experience that I've detailed before, we started to deploy concessional finance kind of instruments, both from a pricing and a tenor perspective. But because we also came a bit late when projects have been approved after a long time, so cost escalations would have already crept in, inflationary pressures and things like that. We also had to push ourselves to be innovative in our structuring, where we had to deploy vet facilities, contingency facilities, and you are found to be in a situation where you will have to also deploy a much higher principal that initially anticipated because of these kind of aspects. And Chair, we had to also go deeper and look at the bankability of the project documents, like the JBCC, the facility agreement, to be able to infuse clauses that makes the projects to be bankable. The other point is that these market fluctuations that are there, including issues around interest rates and black swans that happen in economies, they do affect construction in a very negative way. Therefore, any other funder needs to be able to wear a hat where they are able to put in instruments that are able to hedge against this kind of risks. We also need to talk, Chair, about the operational capacity of the developers and their capability and the people that they really put on the executive management teams and boards of their entities to be able to deal with social housing. And Chair, social housing, just like any other built environment discipline, is quite intensive from engineering perspective, highly specialized. It is important that the developers, they also see it that way and they treat it that way, so that it does attract the necessary attention from the financiers. When the governance processes, when the staff complement and the boards are not adequately capacitated, it becomes a governance risk that turns off investors. In our case, we try to point out some of these things and help them to put up policies, which make the projects to be bankable. But other financiers do not have the patience and time to be able to do that. I guess in our case is because we are a partner that is in government. But if we are preparing the sector to be able to deal with the private sector at scale, we need to address these as if we are a private sector institution. And that is what we have started to do as well, Chair. Some of the issues that are coming up, I did point out to them around regulatory and compliance risk, the issues of the environment, construction risks, and things like that. You'll find that projects do not have contingency plans around major maintenance risk, which talks to the way in which you will take care of the asset, and the asset becomes the main, if you like, cash cow to repay the debt that is at play. So it needs to be underpinned by bankable technical documents. It needs to be underpinned by maintenance contracts that are reflective that the asset will be taken care of. And because this becomes the only revenue stream for repayment of debt, the financiers would be very strict around the maintenance and management of this infrastructure that we are talking about. So, Chair, in the immediate phase that we are dealing with, we have worked with the SHRs and ODAs to help them comply with some of these things ex post facto, meaning that while we are also doing the financing process, but it says to us that there could be benefits in aligning firstly the assessment process and the financing process, and even the kind of due diligences that we do, they need to be aligned so that when we say a project is bankable and it has reached financial close, it has served those objectives from the SHRA's perspective, but also from the lender's perspective. And what that will do, it will remove a lot of things and slack around cost escalations and things like that. Because with the current practice, the SHRA will accredit, the SHRA will approve, and the project start receiving the CCG. But when the financiers start to come in, then they come with an additional, requirement from a risk management perspective. And from a timing perspective, it doesn't help anyone because costs are escalating. It's going to trigger, that financiers add more money, as I have already said. But it also means that it's burdening the same institutions who are borrowing because they now have to take higher levels of debt. And where it's not possible, you need to play around with the financial models to be able to reflect long tenors and maybe lower interest rates to allow the project to stack up to the requirements of the market. So these are some of the issues that they had picked up, Chair, and it's work in progress. Their report, I think once it takes shape, we will also come and workshop it with the SHRA and after with the Department of Human Rights, because as the policy department, they need to be on board. They are already aware of this process, but we want to take everyone along. And once we have agreed with the sector leaders, we are going back to the DFIs that we are targeting for financing to say, this is what we have done, what are your views? And we start to ensure that we implement the intermediate phase that I've spoken about. Lastly, Chair, the intervention impacts for this intermediate phase, obviously, it will ensure that there's alignment between the lender processes as well as the SHRA processes. I was happy to hear Dewald saying a lot of things need to be reviewed, even around accreditation and so forth. I was not going to say that statement upfront, but he relieved me by saying it. And I think based on the work that we are doing, we can then have a very, honest discussion around what is it that is not working currently in the system, how best do we correct it, and how best do we move forward? Because I think it is for the benefit of the sector. The second point is that, this approach will result in economies of scope and scale in administration, but also in the financing and implementation of projects. The other point is that because we would have harmonized a lot of activities, even on the lender side, on the government side, it will lower the transaction costs of transacting in the social housing space. Lower transaction costs, Chair, would also mean that the owners of the projects are also faced with lower costs of financing. Therefore, their project can start to be viable. Most of the money can go to the delivery of the units rather than dealing with financing costs and things like that. It will also create high quality an investable project pipeline. I already said that some of the projects are not shovel ready. And I think it came out when the CEO presented those that are on the verge of approvals and the ones that are coming in. And our approach is that we are going to assist the SHRA to ensure that the pipeline is shovel ready for investment so that when the intermediate phase kicks in, we can just plug and play and ensure that units are churned out so that you can achieve the objectives of the MTSF that are there. The other point is that, Chair, the huge backlogs that are indicated in the preamble slides, we will be able to eradicate them quicker if we take a portfolio effect rather than when we finance projects one by one, where people are cherry picking and we're just doing 3,000 units here, 3,000 units there. We need scale, and scale can only happen in a portfolio kind of effect. The other point is that we would have improved the sector bankability. And for us as the infrastructure fund, our value add would be measured by us exiting the social housing space after having done this. So it would mean that the market failure that we wanted to address, we have addressed it back because we are established in particular for that. And private sector financing will be trickling in. So our objectives would have been achieved. And those who are naturally established to be players in this space, NHFC and other institutions, will then be able to continue financing it without a lot of headache because they would have invested in this process as well. As I said, there would be integrated risk management processes. And the last two are talking around cooperation and coordination. And would have a shared vision as the sector, be it the applicants themselves or developers, be it the grant recipients, be it the SHRA, the Department of Human Settlements, and all the financiers that will be pulling in would understand that these are the targets and we are using these instruments in a coordinated way to be able to ensure that we assist the sector. So, Chair, my parting shot here is that we are here to help the SHRA. We are here to help the players in the market to ensure that we reduce and eventually eliminate slack, in particular on the financing side. And the benefits are that everyone involved would be able to have a fair chance of consideration from a funding perspective because we'd be having different players roping in capital for us to be able to move forward. So we need your support as well where required, and we'll indicate explicitly what kind of support we need to make this happen. Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ngobeni. Your presentation is quite encouraging, and indeed, as SHRA, we can attest to your support and your partnership in some of the projects that we have managed to deliver. As an example of the Goodwood project that you mentioned in your presentation, and many others that are yet to come, and those that have come as well. And thank you for highlighting the risks and the challenges. I think it is in everybody's interest who is in this platform today to understand that, because sometimes people think that the entity were just playing difficult in some instances. But yes, I think all of us need to give the social housing program the value, or we need to put the value in it that it means to most people. It is an important program, and I think the more serious people look into it, I think we can work better as partners in the space. Yes, it is the responsibility of all of us to see to the processes that are going to work for all of us. Yes, I've been saying to the executive that we need to find a way to align ourselves in terms of the grant itself, how we look at all the requirements within the grant itself, looking forward to the next level, which is the financier, whether it's going to be a private or one of the public financiers. So that alignment needs to happen as soon as possible. And thank you for your encouragement in the program that we are doing. Thank you very much. Your presentation is well received. Now I'm going to give over to any hands and any inputs that people would like to share or questions. Let me start with, okay, I've got 4 hands. The first one is Khatutu, followed by Reddy and Mr. Wiseman again. We'll take those 3, respond to those, and then continue with the rest. Thank you. Khatutu, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Tangubeni as well. I just wanted to find out the solution that the Infrastructure Fund and DBSA is coming with. Is it going to only address the 30% for financial closure, or is it the solution for the overall unit costs, where you look at the 70% as well? Because I'm of the view that if you only address the 30%, then SHRA will still be limited to the budget that they have in order to cover the backlog. That's one question. And the second question is, if there are private companies
We've lost you.
where do we start in order to engage with the solution that might be there? Thank you.
Khatutu, we lost you there for a while. If you can just maybe repeat your last session of your question. Okay.
I got the question, Chair.
Okay, sure. All right, cool. Mr. Reddy, followed by Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Thanks, Victor. Jason Reddy, Head of Transacting at the DBSA. It was more not a question, but a comment. Thank you for highlighting some of the bankability risks and mitigants that you obviously encountered in funding these projects. So the comment that I wanted to make, obviously from a funder perspective, I think through the various presentations, we're also seeing that sometimes there needs to be get better alignment between the grant funding and the senior debt component and the requirements for bankable feasibility. So my suggestion would be that we need to possibly have some sort of a workshop that includes both your service providers, your debt funders, and SHRA, just to make sure that there's alignment, because we often also find similar findings that Victor had highlighted. When we get to the end where we're looking at funding senior debt, there are fundamental components of feasibility that are still lacking, and that affects the cost of the project. So my suggestion would be is that this needs to be workshopped so that there could be better alignment across the various pools of funding to fund social housing. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Gavin?
Thanks, Chair. Just to pick up on the first speaker, the same question is obviously we're seeing the massive funding shortage in terms of the CCG space. I think it's very exciting what Infrastructure Fund are doing and the value add they're bringing, in particularly around de-risking the sector as a whole. So we would certainly value ongoing discussion, but if it could provide clarity is around, are there any sort of bridging facilities that Infrastructure Fund could provide to fill some of the CCG void from a budgetary perspective? And what is that also, because I suppose it's really the same question, seeing the huge shortfall. But if you do approach it at a portfolio or program level, and I suppose again, obviously wearing our Western Cape hat, where we have this project ready, robust pipeline, if that creates further discussion and possibilities around, I know CEO referenced a 50-50 type response, but I think to try and explore opportunities within that space, be it through guarantees or just being able to unlock the potential that's sitting there, and would really value that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wiseman. Doc, if you can just maybe respond to those three, because before we call on the others, and CEO, if you've got any inputs on that as well, seeing that there is an issue around the alignment between our considerations when we look at feasibility or the viability of the projects themselves. If there's anything that you can contribute there, but you can go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the CCG one, I think it's coming across very prominently. So let me start with that one. So we already know that the CCG is a constraint, and with the current levels of the CCG, the intermediate phase is not plausible. So part of our discussions with our partners, financiers, others international, they are willing to inject grant funding into the platform. However, they want to see the business plan of this platform. How is it going to work? The buy-in from different financiers who will also be complementing the platform. Hence, we appointed the transaction advisor to help us with that. We are also exploring discussions with National Treasury. They are the ones who financed or funded the 305 million program that I was talking about. So we are going back to them with evidence that that 305 million was appropriately used, and it has achieved what we had said it would achieve. Now that opens up an opportunity to say, but that's not the point. We want to go far. We understand that there are budget constraints and the CCG is constrained. However, here's a business case which is growing the sector. Here will be the benefits, socio-economic and otherwise. Can you also support us more to be able to complement the CCG? But from a financing perspective, the value of our intervention really would be when we start to see less reliance on the CCG going forward. So these funders and financiers bringing in their own money, and you allow the CCG to now be invested in much other projects. That is our vision in relation to that. So Gavin, it's still work in progress around how best we are going to do it. And we also don't want to preempt maybe, if you like, influence the service provider to get to the outcomes that we want to see. We want them to do the work. Once the report comes out, then we go back to all the relevant parties. Department of Human Settlements, we go back to the funders that we already engaged with. So Saisen, we will circle back with you. We already engaged. We will circle back to say, these are the outcomes, and everyone else will be there. Actually, part of the deliverables of the TA is that once things are starting to get ripe, they arrange a workshop with sector players to be able to, again, discuss whether this is making sense or not. So around what Katutu was saying, private companies, how do they approach the platform? They can't approach the platform at this stage because we are still working on it. However, the best way to start is to comply with the SHRA processes that are there, because we are drawing our priority pipeline in line with the SHRA. We don't want to invest in projects that are not in line with the regulatory requirements, and the SHRA is the only regulator of the sector. We actually have an MOA with them, so they are our partners. We won't be able to look at projects that are not meeting the SHRA criteria, and this is also just for alignment purposes, because remember, we are doing this to help the SHRA to achieve its own objectives. So I thought I should, Chair, reflect on those issues, and also indicating that we have not taken out the option of engaging the department to also resource the intermediate phase. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ngobeni. We are moving right in terms of our time. We are now at 12:15, and the session is supposed to finish at 12:30. We've got 4 hands on the chat. I'm going to, okay, now 6 hands. I'm going to cut off at number 6 at Themba Xhakaza. So any hands that have not been raised as yet, please put your queries or your questions or your inputs on the chat, please. We've got Bongani Khatebe, followed by Ntru, and followed by Fezile. And then we'll take the next set after the response to those 3. Please go ahead, Mr. Khatebe.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the doctor for the presentation. So my questions were covered by the first speaker and the third speaker in the last round. Because I got excited when the doctor talked about partnership and the SHRAs must look at themselves as potential partners. And in the local government space, there's cuts every second week. And therefore it has become difficult to produce the required amount of units, and therefore partnerships and sourcing alternative sources of funds becomes key. And I know you've mentioned quite a number of people that you'll touch base with. Doctor, please, Joshko in Joburg is also in need of funding. But I also had a question around how then do we then touch base, or how then do we source these funds? And you've also answered that question, that your partnership with SHRA becomes key in terms of disbursements and all that. So I was covered, and I was excited in terms of how these investments will also unlock some of the bottlenecks that we're having in terms of funding. I'm not sure if I understood the answer in terms of the 30% that was asked by my the first speaker. Can I just get clarity on that? I'm not sure if I understood you, but thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Khatebe. Ntru.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Doc, for the presentation. Greeting again, colleagues. Mine is very, very short, Doc and Chairperson. We have a pipeline, Doc and Chairperson, which is Mount Road Nodal Precinct. It is registered at SHRA Pipeline. In 2021, Doc, we approached Infrastructure South Africa to request assistance in regards to in terms of the connection of the bulk infrastructure. Fortunately, that was approved in a way, Doc. Then last year, the Infrastructure South Africa, basically in 2022, they have written to the city manager in June, requesting the city manager to re-register the project at Infrastructure South Africa so that we can actually access the BIF. So Chair and Doc, we have a challenge in the Buffalo City. That project has not been re-registered at Infrastructure South Africa. We also actually consulted Infrastructure Fund directly to request the same assistance. And Infrastructure Fund indicated that our project, by the way, it is in line with their mandate and they fully support this project. But the municipality, as the public benefit, must be the one that register the project so that we can be actually assisted with the infrastructure BIF, Chair. So even Infrastructure Fund, Chair, is not getting assistance from the city to register the project. Lastly, I'm aware that the city, the National Treasurer, is also engaging the same office of the city manager to register this project at National Treasurer through the Neighborhood Development Partnership Program. So they are also having a challenge with the city in regards to that. So my question, Doc, is what's the best approach? What can we do as the developer? Because there's a lot that we have done. Actually, we're even doing the work of the municipality because as we speak, I'm in Gauteng province. I had a meeting last week with the National Human Settlements.
in regards to this project, Doc. And there is actually assistance, and we get helped by the national office, but they have a challenge with the local municipality. So how can we get assistance in terms of this presidential project, Doc? It is a mega project that is going to be developed in Mdantsane township for the first time. We never have social housing in Mdantsane or a rental stock since it was established in 1963. The township is 60 years old today. I thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Drew. 𝐭𝐨𝐫𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐠.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm that the project that we're talking about in Goodwood, it's DCI Community Housing Services, where infrastructure funds through the help by DOC came in and assisted our project, which will be completing it now in May 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, 𝐭𝐨𝐫𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐠. You are now shifting the goalpost. You had said you'd finish in March. Now here it's May. But anyways, thank you for that. I think you are giving hope to others, you know, to share the experience that you have, that you indeed infrastructure fund is really out there in the market to assist in this social housing program. Doc, if you can just maybe respond to those.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the first one, maybe I responded to it in a long-winded way. So we are solving for both the 30% and the 70%. So both the government piece as well as the private sector piece. Initially, when we conceptualized the program, we only wanted to solve for the 30%, but we were going to be flawed by shortages on the fiscal side in terms of the CCG. So you can't do it without resolving both variables at play here. And, you know, once the transaction advisor come up with the modeling, because one of the activities is that they must do a integrated and consolidated financial model for this portfolio that we are talking about. They will tell us what is the best equation from a funding mix or funding structure perspective, because essentially it might even scientifically prompt us to change this 70%, 30%, but I think that discussion is quite premature. So to respond to the question, we are solving for both. Chair, the Mount Ruth issue that is raised by Drew is a bulk infrastructure issue, and it must be understood from a context of mandate. On our side, they approached us, we listened to his case, we went through the documents and we said, yes, the project is still very much early on in terms of preparation stages. It needs to be prepared thoroughly so that it can be shovel ready, because you can't invest in a project that is not shovel ready. But we took it further. Remember I said, Chair, earlier, we don't pass the buck and we don't chase away anyone. We then contacted the Buffalo City Metro, because this is where the project is, and said, guys, here's a developer who has approached us. He's saying you are not moving. What are the issues? Then they indicated that, no, we know him. However, we need to go back and see if the project links with our priority developments within the city. And from our side, Chair, we are currently guiding him in terms of the next steps. And we are talking with the city to see how best to help him. So we are hopeful that issues will be resolved. But in terms of what he has indicated, mandate is important, because legally, in terms of powers and functions, bulk infrastructure is a mandate of the municipality, and they have to be on board. They have to prioritize the project, and they have to be the ones approaching Infrastructure South Africa and the Infrastructure Fund for the project to be funded and implemented. Chair, I thought I should link into those. And there was a question on the chat, Chair, around whether, what kind of projects are we supporting? We support both greenfield and brownfield projects. The projects that we have supported already, our Goodwood Station, Hospital Street, and others that we are dealing with, I consider them to be stressed projects, given that they were approved long time ago. And because of these issues that I indicated, escalations and things like that, they rendered them to be unbankable. But we came in with bespoke solutions, these bridge facilities and terms, which were then tailor-made to mitigate against the risks that are in the project. So in short, Chair, we look at both greenfields and brownfields, and each and every project is then supported based on its merits and demerits. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Doc. I'm taking now the last, I've just got a message to say we've only got 5 minutes left for this meeting. I've got 3 hands, Themba Xakaza, Lulama Qawa, and 𝐭𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐿. I can't see the same name, I'm sorry. Those are the 3 hands. If your hand is not up already, apologies to you. We won't be taking any more hands, but please continue to write on the chat as long as it's active. Themba, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good day to all the attendees. Chair, maybe mine is a question of clarity. I just wanted to find out, now that we haven't had any sittings to consider the various applications for accreditation purposes, what arrangements have been made, because we are struggling with anxieties of property owners that we've completed offer to purchase, for example, for the acquisition of land. We've got studies such as your demand studies that would obviously exceed the 12-month period that you consider for approval of an application, and things such as your property valuations that the longer you take to consider them, we run the risk of having to redo those studies. There was a question that something very similar asked earlier around the dates for when the various committees will be sitting. If you can, I don't know, share the dates as well as whatever arrangement that we have in place to deal with issues of accreditation, given that there aren't any days that are running. Thank you.
Thank you, Themba. Lulama?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mine is just to get clarity, Chair. Does the fund provide non-financial support? And if yes, in which areas within the value chain of social housing would they provide such support? And how do we access that support as social housing institutions? Thank you.
Thank you, Lulama. 𝐭𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐿, which is going to be the last one.
Thank you, Chair. I'm 𝐭𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐿 from the NHFC. I just wanted to start by saying the NHFC did do a similar exercise to highlight what really the challenges of funding in the social housing space were. So a lot of it is quite similar to the preliminary outcomes of what Infrastructure Fund has presented. And in so doing, we started implementing some of these suggestions in how we then consider social housing deals. This particularly speaking to the governance. There are certain things that we insist on from the onset to say we need certain expertise to form part of the board members, that there must be somebody with a built environment background, a legal background, a finance background to speak to really the challenges around governance, and that the people that would then be driving this have a level of understanding of the industry. One other important aspect, Chair, which we have also started implementing, is that of property management. I think there has been a lot of work that has been put towards addressing construction risk, and we are seeing results in that regard, in a sense that we do appoint the relevant construction teams, both professional team as well as the contractors that are now being appointed are sort of competent. So that speaks to addressing the construction risks that was there previously. The move that we are seeing certainly in the social housing space, and as far as risk is concerned, is moving towards property management, and that is really driven by the fact that we are struggling to collect on the long-term debt in the social housing space. I think currently, as the NHFC, our collection rate in the social housing space is sitting at about 46%, which is quite telling that, okay, we do build the stock, it's on the ground, but now we have put in measures in place to address the construction risk. But what we are seeing a lot of now is the risk moving towards the operation of the stock on the ground. That speaks to the ability to then collect and then repay the debt. That also speaks to the maintenance of the stock that we have on the ground, which we are seeing not being done as it should, which obviously then leads to other challenges in the space, which will be maybe rental boycotts and the likes. Yes, we are in conversation with the IF, looking at solutions at a programmatic level, and hopefully really those will start addressing some of the challenges that have been addressed. That is the one aspect of my comment, Chair. Secondly, I just wanted to understand in terms of the current delivery on the ground, as obviously projects are coming to us. We are being approached, particularly to issue expression of interest letters, as that is some of the prerequisite requirements in order for a project to be accredited. So I'm not sure when will we get the guidance to say, as now we are going to be prioritizing projects maybe in line with a geographic spread. It speaks to then how we also then prioritize the kind of deals that we assess. So I just wanted to get an understanding of when will we, what will come first? Will the SHRA then identify what projects form part of their project, in which case then those are the projects that we would also then prioritize from a debt perspective? That's not clear on my end. As of today, how is it that we will be doing things on the ground going forward? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ħomotso, for that. And I've noted that you are coming from NHFC, which is a sibling entity of SHRA. And I'm happy that you are demonstrating that you do from time to time sit together and align with our accreditation process in terms of what you look into, as well in terms of looking at the feasibility and the funding aspect of the rest of the senior funding, if I can call it that. But in as far as going forward with the engagements between the two entities, I'm sure the CEO is listening to that, and I'm sure there is a plan in place to engage with yourselves. Yes, the issues that you are raising indeed are as you have expressed them, in that we are finding the challenges in the management now of these assets, and that's where we need to find each other in closing the gap in terms of property management, etc., etc. I think I'm going to hand over for the last time to you, Doc, to respond to the very last questions that were raised, and then we can go into the next item where the CEO is going to take us through the action plan and the next steps after this session. Thank you, Doc. You can go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So we are in the business of financing in terms of our mandate, and currently part of the package does not include non-financing interventions like technical assistance and things like that. However, in conceptualizing the intermediate phase, we are having that discussion to say how best do we firstly align with the interventions that the SHRA already has. But we've been also approached by other players, as I said, international, wanting to offer some grants of some sort from a capacity building point of view. So we are hoping that in conceptualizing this, financial intervention from a pooling perspective, it will also come with some, if you like, technical assistance, especially from a project prep also point of view, but also to address some of the issues that I was indicating, attracting, competent people within some of the SHIs mostly, because some of the ODAs they already have, to ensure that they do work. As I said, it's a very specialized area, and it needs to be supported and treated as such, so that we have people who understand the built environment properly, and projects are able to be financed and implemented. So the short answer is that we don't offer non-financial interventions at this point. And Chair, we work very nicely with the NHFC, and I think when the timing is right, we will convene everyone, as I said, to be able to share our plans, the details of where we are going, and so forth. And the SHRA has already prioritized certain projects that we are using now as a dry run for the intermediate phase from an assessment point of view. And once we have tangible information around them, we'll also communicate with our partners, including the NHFC, around investment potential in terms of this intermediate phase platform. Thanks.
Thank you, Doc. And I do also acknowledge the input that came from DBSA, and also confirming to have said with SHRA and doing the alignment exercise in terms of the funding model and how we can find each other in this space. I'm going to now hand over to the CEO to take us forward in terms of outlining what the action plan and the next steps from here are going to be. CEO.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to all the participants who are here. SHRA, Aveni, thank you very much for your inputs. In terms of the action plan, there are some immediate things that we need to focus on. The first one that I have is for us as the SHRA to approach our council and find common ground around how do we navigate around, the burgeoning pipeline versus the funding constraints that we have, but also being mindful of the commitments that are already on the table. So, and as I indicated earlier on, that we are going to be approaching council in this regard in April of this year. So it's the first month of the new financial year. There is the issue of the work that Musaveni has spoken about, that looks at the optimization of the funding or of the social housing model, because you have to look at it as the program itself, and then the financing aspects are just one element of it. There's the property management aspects, there are the governance issues that a lot of the colleagues have spoken about. That's kind of like in the medium term. There is the issue of a convergence and finding a common ground around the key investment variables, particularly with our public sector entities. You know, but this has got prospects of other elements to it. It's collaboration around DDs as well, and finding ways to avoid the sequential nature of approvals, where, you know, the SHRA does its own thing, and only when there is commitment on the part of the SHRA do the NHFC and any other funding entities then come on board. How do we streamline those processes so that they run in parallel, such that we minimize on the time and it impacts the cost aspect, the escalation aspects that have been spoken about, but in doing so, also not compromise the independence of each of the institutions that are there. There are some operational issues that need to be resolved as well. You know, the resolution of the IIG matters that have been raised around the payment of consultants and all of those things. That's part of the action plan. The issue of dates around some of the key committees, those can be dispensed with very, you know, fairly quickly. Hopefully, as the chair has indicated earlier on, that there is a proposed further engagement with our partner organizations who are here with the minister. Some of these issues may become extremely pertinent for us to be able to report back on them at that particular session, so that you know, we give you confidence that you know, this is not just a talk shop with no follow-up actions on our side. So those are some of the issues that I took note of. Yeah, and I will pause there, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CEO, for that summary and also indicating the map going forward. We've now come to the end of the session, and I do want to say I think it was a successful session, and I want to encourage the entity to have more of these sessions where we can engage with our stakeholders so that we can understand what the issues are and the challenges are out there in the sector, because we are all looking forward to the same, we have the same purpose, basically, to see the program of social housing succeeding. Thank you to all those who made presentations today. Our CEO, Mr. Sandile Lutuli, Mr. 𝐭𝐶𝐞𝐿, and Dr. Ngobeni. And I would also like to say thank you to my council members for the support that they've given me in this session. And the rest of the executives from the entity, CEOs from other entities as well. I did note Mr. Khatebe from Joshco, who is also a stakeholder in our value chain, DBSA, and all the other entities that were able to support us. And thank you to the organizers, to the rest of the staff of the SHRA who were there to support the program and also actually listen out for themselves and hear firsthand what the issues are. I mean, we can't, as council or the executive, just own what is happening outside there. They have to hear it from where it's coming from as well. Thank you for making the time to be here. Thank you to all those that have honored the invitation, and mostly for your participation. We have noted the issues that you have raised. We have noted the issues that were raised on the chat. And as the CEO has indicated, that there has to be some kind of platform where we give feedback to some of the questions or issues that were raised. And as I indicated earlier on, that there will be a session with the minister directly and the department where the SHIs and ODAs are going to be invited to attend a session where they can then share their challenges, and the minister will look into how they can intervene. And I suppose all the other entities as well that are supporting our program will also be invited in that session. With those few words, thank you very much, and I am declaring the session closed. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Shit.